The birth of the angel potion. The prince's tomb was a place of nightmares, its depths teeming with rampaging undead creatures, corrupted by ancient curse energy. And soon, Lin Yun would have to venture even further, to the Bone Plain, a realm overrun with even stronger undead. Naturally, he was preparing a potion specifically designed to counter them. In this era, potioneers had few effective means against the undead. Dealing with such creatures was typically left to enchanters or array refiners, those who could imbue weapons with holy attributes or construct formations to repel the undead. But that was only true for the alchemists of this age. For Lin Yun, this was hardly a challenge. He was preparing the angel potion, a formula that simply did not exist in this era. In fact, it wouldn't appear for another 3,000 years, its creation hindered by the sheer complexity of the calculations required to develop it. Even Lin Yun couldn't perform those calculations himself, but he already knew the answer. So, rather than wasting time, he cheated, directly using the results of those calculations to reconstruct the formula. He handed the completed formula and refining instructions to Fallow, his most trusted alchemist. Fallow, follow these instructions and arrange the formula accordingly, Lin Yun said. Without hesitation, Fallow took the papers and immediately began working at his refining table. As an experienced alchemist, he didn't need additional guidance. But soon, his forehead was drenched in sweat. He had barely completed a tenth of the formula when he realized just how monstrous it was. The deeper he went, the more shaken he became. For a moment, a ridiculous thought crossed his mind. Would great Mage Merlin silence him after he finished calculating it? Because this formula was simply too terrifying. Even after minimal adjustments, the knowledge contained within it could be used to create at least 5 entirely new potions, each one unlike anything ever seen in Thousand Sail City. And Lin Yun had just handed it to him like it was nothing. Master alchemists across the continent would kill to get their hands on something like this. It was at that moment that Fallow finally understood something. No wonder great Mage Merlin was so confident that I'd become a great alchemist within 3 months. With knowledge like this, even 3 months seemed too long. If he studied this formula carefully, he could probably become a great alchemist in 3 weeks. Looking back, his decision to leave the Blackhorn auction house and join the Gilded Rose was the best choice he had ever made. If he had stayed with Blackhorn, would he have ever had access to such forbidden knowledge? Would he have ever received the personal guidance of great Mage Merlin? Never. At first, when he saw the 10-year work contract and the strict non-disclosure clauses, he had felt that Lin Yun was being excessively cautious. But now he realized this was not paranoia. This was knowledge so valuable, so dangerous that it demanded such protection. Honestly, if he had known back then just how terrifying this opportunity was, he would have argued that 10 years wasn't long enough. 3 hours later, Fallow finally finished organizing the formula. He quickly gathered the necessary magic materials based on the results of his calculations. Then, he watched in awe as Lin Yun effortlessly threw 7 different materials into a crucible, refining them with precise movements. One after another, potions filled with holy energy emerged on the refining table, radiating a brilliant glow. Fallow couldn't help himself. He had to ask, "Great Mage Merlin, what is this potion?" "This?" Lin Yun glanced at him before replying casually. "This is the Angel Potion. It grants holy energy capable of intimidating undead life forms. Additionally, it enhances physical strength and restores mana." Fallow was speechless. Most potions had a single effect. Even high-grade potions created by great alchemists rarely had more than 2 effects at most. But this? A single potion that granted holy power, strengthened the body, and replenished mana? This was on an entirely different level. How was Lin Yun this powerful? "Oh, by the way," Lin Yun added nonchalantly, "we have quite a bit of leftover magic materials. You've learned a bit from working with the formula. Use them to practice refining on your own. It'll be good for your growth." With that, he gathered the 10 completed angel potions and left the laboratory. His next focus was the stone tablet. After that, he would join the Gilded Rose's next caravan to Edge Rift, where he would explore the prince's tomb in search of the legendary reincarnation eye. Fallot remained still for a few moments, staring at the remaining materials and the intricate formula on the table. Then, taking a deep breath, he began working on his own. An afternoon of experimentation. Fallot spent the rest of the afternoon in the alchemy lab, attempting to replicate Lin Yun's success. However, he was only an alchemist, not a great alchemist like Lin Yun. His skills and experience were far inferior. Even after hours of work, he only managed to refine 2 potions, both far weaker than the angel potion. One was the meditation potion, which increased mana recovery speed. The other was the dragon strength potion, which enhanced physical strength. Both were based on fragments of the angel potion's effects, but neither could replicate the full power of the original. And the holy attribute? That was completely beyond his reach. But that didn't bother him. He wasn't in a hurry. With the terrifying knowledge he had gained today, Fallot knew that, as long as he remained in the Gilded Rose, it was only a matter of time before he mastered the process. Eventually, he would be able to create the angel potion himself. When that day came, he would be the strongest alchemist in Thousand Sail City, except for Great Mage Merlin, of course. Fallot picked up the 2 potions he had made, deep in thought. Even though they were mere knockoffs of the angel potion, they were still superior to most existing potions. In fact, his dragon strength potion was a direct upgrade to the well-known berserk blood potion, which only provided a short berserk effect. His version? It offered a comprehensive enhancement to physical abilities, something any warrior would prefer. As realization dawned on him, Fallot grinned. The Monchi family has been trying to compete with the Gilded Rose. Well then, let's see how they handle this. Even if Great Mage Merlin didn't care to deal with them, he did. As he finished tidying up the lab, Fallot turned to one of the assistants. "Remy, bring me house," he ordered. The next move was his. The Monchi family's rising confidence. At this moment, the Monchi family was in high spirits. The alchemy exhibition had concluded successfully, and the flood of incoming orders had dispelled the dark clouds that had loomed over them in recent weeks. Even the normally stern patriarch, Monchi, was occasionally seen with a rare smile. For the first time in a long while, even Mason, whom Monchi had often found troublesome, seemed more pleasing to the eye. Yes, things are finally looking up for the Monchi family. A few days ago, they had been struggling. They had failed to obtain the Loch Merlin estate. They had also lost the bid for the Red Flame fish oil at the auction, which was meant for Solon of the Black Tower. To make matters worse, the Gilded Rose had risen far too quickly, while their own Twin Moon splendor had been sealed, a near disaster that had nearly spun out of control. But then, Solon had intervened once again. Through his influence, the Black Tower Council agreed to support the Monchi family by granting them advanced alchemical knowledge and the assistance of 2 great alchemists. This led to the creation of 2 completely new potions. Nothingness Potion, granting a brief moment of physical immunity. Berserk Blood Potion, inducing temporary berserk state, amplifying strength. These 2 potions single-handedly reversed their misfortunes. Now, orders flooded in, and just one day before the exhibition's end, even the leaders of major mercenary groups had come to personally inquire about these new potions. For mercenary groups, numbering in the thousands to tens of thousands, their annual potion consumption was astronomical. If Monchi secured deals with just a few of them, the Twin Moon splendor would solidify its dominance. His only regret? The Silver Moon mercenary group had not yet placed an order. But Monchi wasn't worried. Once the Nothingness Potion and Berserk Blood Potion gained wider recognition, the Silver Moon mercenaries would abandon the Gilded Rose in favor of the superior products. Because in the end, alchemy was about results. The Gilded Rose's potions simply couldn't compete. Sasa may not see it yet, but he'll understand soon enough, Monchi thought with satisfaction. Just to be sure, he needed to make additional moves. Ryan, go see Great Alchemist Hawkins. The Black Tower had provided 2 great alchemists, but Monchi primarily worked with Hawkins. Hawkins was close to Solon and had been helpful to the Monchi family in both public and private matters. The other alchemist, Lavin, was different. Lavin kept a strictly businesslike attitude, and his backer in the Black Tower opposed Solon. While Lavin followed orders and worked with the Monshi family, Monshi could tell he was not fully committed. That was why Monshi always turned to Hawkins when dealing with the Gilded Rose. A week of intense study. Meanwhile, Lin Yun remained deeply immersed in the study of the stone tablet. He knew that his current understanding of it was barely scratching the surface. This wasn't just any artifact. It was a true spirit-level component. True spirit-level. Artifacts at this level held power rivaling archmages, and in the field of alchemy, it was comparable to an artisan-level creation. But in Lin Yun's hands, the tablet's current function was limited to boosting the efficiency of his magic array. Its true power remained dormant. He wasn't discouraged, though. Even the Cloud Tower's great mage, despite his heaven-defying luck, had taken 100 years to fully control the true spirit magic tool he obtained from the prince's tomb. Lin Yun didn't have that kind of luck, but even the slightest understanding of this tablet could give him an edge in battle. And so, he spent an entire week in his research. During this time, he was completely unaware that Fallot had made progress with a knockoff version of the Angel Potion. Nor did he know that Fallot had dragged House into it. Fallot's work in the alchemy lab. In the Gilded Rose's laboratory, Fallot was not in a good mood. His usual temper had worsened as he busied himself over a refining table, barking orders at a flustered House. Control the temperature. Control the damn temperature. How many times do I have to say it? Sweating profusely, House hurriedly adjusted the crucible's heat, trying his best to keep up. I'm sorry, alchemist fellow. I didn't mean to mess it up. There were 4 crucibles lined up, each requiring precise timing and adjustments. The strain was enough to leave House breathless. After an hour of intense work, they finally arranged 40 bottles of dragon-strength potion on the table. Fallot exhaled sharply, rubbing his temples. You? Alchemist Fallot, my name is House, the young alchemist muttered, his voice filled with exhaustion and grievance. After a week of working together, Fallot still hadn't remembered his name. Right? House. Fallot waved dismissively. Go find Remy and tell him to start planning an alchemy exhibition. Understood. House hurriedly left the lab, only to return 3 minutes later, looking uneasy. What now? You didn't find Remy? Fallot asked, frowning. No, that's not it. House hesitated before speaking. An alchemist from Twin Moon's Splendor has arrived. He wants to initiate a skill exchange with the Gilded Rose. Fallot's expression darkened. After working at Blackhorn Auction House for so many years, he knew exactly what that meant. Should we inform Boss Merlin? House asked hesitantly. Fallot shook his head. No need. Great Mage Merlin had been locked in research for a full week. If he was still isolated, that meant he was on to something important. Interrupting him now would be foolish. Besides, Fallot had no intention of letting the Twin Moon Splendor have their way. He cracked his knuckles, a cold smirk forming on his face. Let me handle this. Then he turned to House. You come with me. House wanted to correct him again, but in the end, he simply sighed and followed Fallot with a wronged expression. The confrontation begins. The Twin Moon Splendor had come looking for trouble, but they had no idea what they were about to walk into. Fallot had learned from the best, and if they wanted a battle of alchemical skills, they were about to regret ever stepping foot in the Gilded Rose.
Hey, welcome to Firescale Audiobooks. If you enjoy our audiobooks, please consider subscribing to the channel. Also, feel free to share your review in the comments section below.
In fact, Fallot didn't know that Lin Yun was already aware of the presence of the Twin Moon Splendor's alchemist. While researching the stone tablet, Lin Yun had a stroke of inspiration and wanted the old butler to recall Raymond. But when the old butler came, Lin Yun didn't have the time to mention Raymond before the old butler told him about the alchemist dispatched by the Twin Moon's Splendor for interaction. The old butler relayed this news to Lin Yun with a look of worry plastered all over his face. After being at Loch Merlin's side for so many years and seeing so many matters, how could the old butler not know what this meant? It was an attempt to suppress them. They wanted to seize the market by showing that they had superior skill. An exchange of skills sounded nice, but its true purpose was to make a competing business lose its reputation. Haha, it really came. Lin Yun wasn't surprised at all. He knew that something like the skill exchange would have come sooner or later when the Manchi family organized that alchemy exhibition. The Manchi family couldn't get involved in the alchemy market without fighting the Gilded Rose. The appearance of the Hope Potion made the Gilded Rose one of the best alchemy shops of Thousand Sail City. By the time the shop expanded, the one-apart could be removed. Although the Twin Moon Splendor had been quite famous, they had still been lacking a signature potion like the Hope Potion. But now that they held the alchemy exhibition and announced the Nothingness and Berserk Blood Potions, they had the confidence to pressure the Gilded Rose in terms of skill. Lin Yun would have doubted Manchi's intelligence if he hadn't taken that opportunity. But Lin Yun wasn't anxious at all. Lin Yun guessed that the Nothingness and Berserk Blood Potions were knockoffs of his Ghost Potion and his Volcano Potion. Manchi had spent 4 million golds to buy the 2 potions in the Blackhorn auction. After all, Lin Yun knew that they had bought them to try to learn what techniques had been used to create them. But so what if they researched them? Alchemy skills couldn't be learnt so easily. A decently skilled great alchemist might be able to analyze some of the skills used if he spent enough time, perhaps regarding the processing of magic materials, the theoretical planning, or the usage of manipulation skills. But in Nascent's long history, there has never been a great alchemist able to copy the work of a master alchemist, let alone a master alchemist. A great alchemist has never been able to copy the work of another great alchemist solely through potion analysis. Only the most superficial skills would be obtained through analysis, as some of the core content would never be able to be analyzed. Thus, alchemy knowledge would only be spread through master-disciple inheritance. Some things could only be understood from the mouth of one's teacher. Those things were the core of alchemy. Only if one was an artisan alchemist would one be able to easily analyze an apprentice alchemist's work and instantly understand it. What the analysis of the Ghost and Volcano Potions brought were only inferior knockoffs like the Nothingness and Berserk Blood Potions. 1 second of physical immunity and a short Berserk effect. Lin Yun didn't even bother to look at that kind of stuff. Falo had already taken house to the Gilded Rose's lobby. It was completely filled with people. They had all heard that the Twin Moon Splendor and the Gilded Rose were going to have an exchange of skills. Some came from the neighboring Sage Tower, some from the nearby Mercenary Guild, and some were even bosses and alchemists from other alchemy shops. In any case, Falo was surrounded by over 100 people when he entered the lobby. How could there be so many people? Falo inwardly cursed. These guys came to rejoice in others' misfortunes. They ran over one after the other when they heard that there was something interesting going on. Fuck, why aren't you checking on the Silver Moon Mercenary Group's Edge Rift expedition? Scared of being hurt. After having these harsh thoughts, Falo took another glance at the crowd and couldn't help frowning. It's actually Hawkins? A middle-aged person was standing in the middle of the crowd. Hawkins was in his 40s. He looked ordinary and was wearing a shabby black robe. But Falo knew that this was a great alchemist. A great alchemist from the Black Tower. Falo had been studying alchemy at Oakland before he joined the Blackhorn Auction House. That place was within the Black Tower's area of influence, and Hawkins had already been quite famous at the time as a great alchemist in his 30s. Hawkins was once invited to teach them a class. It didn't take long before he was recruited by the Black Tower. Falo also knew that besides being a great alchemist, he was also a very powerful great mage. When Falo left for Thousand Sail City, Hawkins had already become a 5th-rank great mage. His current strength should be between the 6th and 7th ranks. Troublesome, Falo worried. At Novel Benedat. Let me introduce myself. My name is Hawkins, Twin Moon Splendor's great alchemist. I believe everyone should have heard of our recent alchemy exhibition. Of the 2 potions presented, the Berserk Blood Potion is my work. Hawkins' eyes swept around the crowd as he talked, but they didn't stop on anyone. This was because Hawkins felt that no one here was worthy of his attention. As a great alchemist from the Black Tower, Hawkins was full of pride. Even if he looked at the entire Thousand Sail City, only 3 alchemists living there were worthy of his attention. One was one of the big 3 of the Sage Tower, Thorpe. Another one was the leader of the Alchemist Guild, Liss. And the last one was Blackhorn Auction House's Khadgar. The first two because they were close to the Master Alchemist rank, and the last one because he was backed by the Blackhorn Chamber of Commerce. Besides them, no other great alchemist was worthy of his attention in Thousand Sails City, because he was a great alchemist of the Black Tower. As for the Gilded Rose, there was no need to even mention it. Even the Gilded Rose's Hope Potion wasn't worth mentioning. Apart from the production cost, the Hope Potion wasn't a particularly amazing potion. In the end, the Hope Potion only targeted magic apprentices. The alchemy knowledge required was only at the alchemist level. As long as they had the recipe, any ordinary alchemist would be able to complete it. If not for the Manchi patriarch asking over and over again, even promising all kinds of precious magic materials, he wouldn't have been willing to come to the Gilded Rose. What skill exchange? How could a bunch of ordinary alchemists be good enough to exchange skills with me? Forget it, I'm already here. I just have to do as Leader Manchi told me and teach these poor alchemists what potioneering truly is. Hawkins helplessly shook his head, hoping that he wouldn't waste too much time here. I came here today because I heard that the Gilded Rose had some accomplishments in the potioneering field. The Hope Potion that has been released some time ago has been called the most mystical potion of the past 10 years in Thousand Sails City. Huh. Hawkins stopped there, his chuckle full of clear disdain as he made fun of his counterpart. Great alchemist Hawkins, how come you have time to visit the Gilded Rose today? Fallon knew that he had no other choice but to step up and respond. Honestly, if it had been before, Fallon would definitely have turned around without a word upon being confronted by Hawkins. What a joke, with his status as a 9th-rank mage and alchemist. How could he oppose someone who was a great mage and a great alchemist? Wasn't that asking for trouble? In fact, during his time at the Blackhorn Auction House, Fallon had always done so. There wasn't anyone in the Blackhorn Auction House that was better than Fallon at reading body language and adapting to the situation. He worked there for many years, and the only time he made a mistake that got him in trouble was when he met Lin Yin. But Fallon had no plan to retreat today. Who are you? Hawkins asked. I am Fallon, the Gilded Rose's alchemist. I listened to your lessons a few times at Oakland. Oh, Fallon, I'm sorry. I'm getting older and my memory is playing tricks on me, Hawkins said, smiling contemptuously. Hawkins was only in his 40s and was far from losing his memories due to old age. He only said this because he didn't feel like speaking to a mere alchemist. He was an esteemed, great alchemist. So wouldn't it be a loss of reputation if people learnt that he met an acquaintance in such a place that was a mere alchemist? Saying that his memory was playing tricks actually meant, sorry, I don't know you. Don't act familiar with me. Unfortunately, Fallon was far less tactful than Hawkins imagined. After being ridiculed by Hawkins, Fallon acted as if he hadn't heard him and revealed an extremely passionate smile. I really didn't expect to come across great alchemist Hawkins in Thousand Sails City. Oh, right. I heard you mention an exchange of skill with the Gilded Rose. That's very good. Great alchemist Hawkins. I've always kept in mind your profound knowledge after your classes in Oakland. If you have time, please give me some pointers. Fallon, I'm very busy right now, Hawkins muttered while showing obvious displeasure. Fuck, did you not hear me saying I couldn't recognize you? Was my meaning not clear enough? I don't know you, okay? That's strange. Great alchemist Hawkins. Didn't you come to the Gilded Rose for an exchange of skills? Yes. What about it? Well, in my introduction, I did say that I was an alchemist of the Gilded Rose. Hawkins almost choked. At this time, he really felt like pulling Fallon's ear and asking if he was dumb enough to not understand what he meant by exchange of skills. I came here to smash your reputation. You didn't expect the great me to come from the Black Tower to give some pointers to the Gilded Rose's inept alchemists? I just received a lot of precious materials from Leader Manchi to cause trouble down here. Calm down, calm down. Hawkins took a deep breath and kept telling himself to keep his composure. He was an esteemed great alchemist. How could he lose his manners in front of an alchemist and a bunch of onlookers? That would bring shame to the Black Tower. Forget it. Isn't it just giving some pointers? What kind of knowledge could an alchemist in his 20 have access to? I could easily do it even if 10 of him participated. After convincing himself of this, Hawkins thought about how to proceed. Okay, let's just go with pointers. I'll use this opportunity to show everyone how poor the level of the Gilded Rose's alchemists is. If they still dare to talk about compounding the most mystical potion of the decade after that. Okay, fellow, ask your question. I am in a hurry. Thank you, great alchemist Hawkins. Fellow hurriedly fished out a paper from his pocket and explained, You see, great alchemist Hawkins, this formula only lacks one key piece of data. I computed it for a few months, but there has been no result. Can you help? Sure, let me see. Hawkins carelessly took the paper and checked the formula written on it. 1 minute later, Hawkins was faintly frowning. 10 minutes later, Hawkins' expression became grave. 30 minutes later, Hawkins finally pushed away the crowd to look for a table, before taking a quill and starting to jot down some computations. 1 hour later, his forehead was soaked in sweat. 2 hours later, it was Fallow's turn to become impatient. Great alchemist Hawkins, have you computed the result yet? Hold on. Hawkins wiped some sweat from his forehead and quickly wrote more calculations on a sheet of paper. One piece of paper wasn't enough, so there were now several dozens of sheets spread before him, filled with all kinds of characters and figures. But the more he calculated, the more Hawkins felt powerless. From where did that damn Fallow get such a broken formula? It was like a maze. Regardless of how hard he tried to solve it, it felt as if he was getting lost in that maze. Great alchemist Hawkins, it is already evening. Do you want to eat dinner? Snap! The quill in Hawkins' hand broke. Add it novel Benedette. Go get a new quill for great alchemist Hawkins. Bring a blanket too. You might be spending the night here. Understood, alchemist Fallow. There was no need to ask. House knew that Fallow was asking him. He quickly changed Hawkins' quill. But when he fetched the blanket, he noticed that the great alchemist was glaring at him in anger. He didn't know whether or not he should hand it over. Don't worry, great alchemist Hawkins. There's no need to hurry. You should take your time to make sure you do it properly. Fallow's expression looked sincere, but he was already inwardly laughing. What a lousy great alchemist. He really thought that he was omnipotent and dared to come to the Gilded Rose for an exchange of skills. Did you even check who this building belongs to? Do you understand now? A formula that great mage Merlin casually gave me to practice can easily stump you. Hawkins' quill was filling page after page. Besides Fallow occasionally asking a few concerned questions, there was actually no sound in the entire lobby, as all the remaining onlookers were curiously wondering what kind of formula would take a great alchemist like Hawkins a whole afternoon. Only Fallow knew the real reason. This formula had been given to him by great Mage Merlin some days ago. It was to be used as daily practice. Fallow remembered great Mage Merlin saying that the day he was able to complete the calculations for the formula would be the day he advanced to become a master alchemist. Although Hawkins had been a great alchemist for many years, it was clear that he was still far from advancing to become a master alchemist. And let alone Hawkins. Even other great alchemists who were senior to Hawkins, such as Basoro, Granger, or even Khadgar, were far from being at that level. In Thousand Sails City, only Thorpe and Liss were close to that realm. With Hawkins' current level, challenging this difficult formula would only end in tragedy. True enough, Hawkins was quite pitiful at this moment. He had been in a hurry to deal with Fallow. After all, what kind of complicated question could an alchemist come up with? He planned to solve it quickly and then leave, but he ultimately ended up in a bind. Damn, is this really the kind of knowledge an alchemist can come into contact with? Are you kidding me? It wouldn't be that bad if Fallow were a great alchemist. As in that case, he could have just said that he couldn't solve the issue. So what if he couldn't solve it? He could just throw the problem back. And since Fallow couldn't either, it could have easily been put aside if no one could solve it. The problem was that Fallow was an ordinary alchemist. This was truly annoying. An alchemist asked for pointers from a great alchemist on a formula he had issues with. Wouldn't it be shameful to throw the problem back after being unable to solve it? Hawkins felt his heart grow cold. What could be done? If the stalemate persisted, would he really have to stay the night, as Fallow said? That would be such a huge joke, yet the people of the Gilded Rose even prepared a blanket. But if I can't get out of this stalemate, wouldn't I have to admit defeat to an alchemist? Me, an esteemed great alchemist? If this spread, How could I have any reputation left? Hawkins felt like he was like a slice of meat on a barbecue. Regardless of which side was on the grill, he would still be roasted. Beads of sweat accumulated on Hawkins' forehead as time passed. He finally stopped calculating and wiped the sweat from his forehead. Over 100 completely filled pages had fallen near his feet as he was already sinking in despair due to that formula. That simply wasn't a problem he could challenge. Hawkins was now only thinking of finding a way to escape this predicament, and as for that formula, to hell with it. In the end, an entire 5 hours passed. But none of the remaining onlookers were willing to leave, as they all felt that a rare, amusing show was unfolding. Since matters reached this point, even the most slow-witted onlookers could see that the great alchemist Hawkins might end up like a fool. This great alchemist Hawkins came to the Gilded Rose to exchange skills, or in other terms, to trash their reputation, but ultimately he didn't even meet a great alchemist from the Gilded Rose, yet he was stymied by a young alchemist in his 20s. They could rarely see such a good show, so who was willing to leave? And thus, Hawkins' pressure was increased quite a bit. Losing face was losing face, but Hawkins was truly unable to accept having his reputation trashed in front of so many people. No, I have to find a way to counterattack. Right, there is still the Berserk blood potion. Hawkins' eyes suddenly brightened, and his thoughts became clear, as if a bolt of lightning streaked across his mind. Fuck it, I'll make Fellow lose his mind. I came today to the Gilded Rose for a skill exchange, not to help you with a problem. Indeed, it was really a loss of reputation for a great alchemist to be unable to answer an alchemist question. But since that already was the case, he might as well pull the Gilded Rose down with it. In the end, you have to see whose reputation is affected the most. Fellow. Hawkins made his decision and immediately put the quill down to the side before slowly standing up. I already have an idea on how this formula should be calculated, but I'm short on time today. I'll look into it after the exchange of skills is over. All the onlookers felt disdain for him when they heard those words. Damn, that's a true great alchemist. He is so much more thick-skinned than the alchemist. At it novel been at. This kind of lie definitely couldn't be believed. He hadn't managed to calculate the formula in 5 hours, and his sweat was completely drowning the Gilded Rose. Even idiots would be able to understand that he hadn't found the answer. Saying that he had an idea and that he would share after the exchange of skills, didn't he mean in his next life instead? But Hawkins had already made a decision. Since he decided to use the Berserk blood to drag the Gilded Rose down, he wouldn't care about the audience's contempt. He already lost face anyway. So what was a bit more? At this moment, Hawkins felt as if he had touched upon the pinnacle of shamelessness. Then I shall thank great alchemist Hawkins. Fellow was still smiling cordially, but everyone could see the ridicule hidden within. You are welcome. Having committed to this route, Hawkins' facial expression became natural. He even ignored Fallow's ridicule and smiled as if nothing had happened as he took out a red potion from his bag. This is a bottle of Berserk blood. Everyone should already know of its effects. But our Twin Moon Splendor has always insisted on sharing skills, and thus we do not plan on keeping the formula and recipe of the Twin Moons potion secret. Of course, that is as long as the Gilded Rose can take out a formula and recipe with similar effect. Our shops can still go through the skill exchange, even if the potion is a bit inferior. I believe the Gilded Rose wouldn't refuse. After all, this would give more alternatives to the customers, unless the Gilded Rose doesn't think about their customers. Hawkins' words were quite fierce. This showed why Mon-Chi would want to send this great alchemist for an exchange of skills. He truly wasn't a typical great alchemist, always immersed in knowledge and experiments. He was a great alchemist from the Black Tower. How could one survive in that place without the ability to scheme? With a few sentences, the Gilded Rose was pushed to the edge, not attaching importance to their customers. Such a serious accusation, not leaving any escape route for the Gilded Rose. The sensation caused by the Twin Moons Splendor's alchemy exhibition was catching up to the one caused by the Hope Potion. Almost everyone knew that the Berserk blood potion was tailored for swordsmen. The immense surge of power of the Berserk effect could let a swordsman ignore the difference between ranks and have the ability to contend against a great swordsman. Moreover, the berserk blood could be mass-produced. One swordsman might not be much, and perhaps 10 weren't enough, but 100 or 200 swordsmen would be enough to make a high mage feel numb once they drank berserk blood. At this time, even the harshest onlooker would have to admit that the effects of the berserk blood potion were truly formidable. People were worried about the Gilded Rose at this moment. Their gazes converged on Fallow. Everyone wanted to know how this young alchemist who had managed to make Hawkins lose face would answer. I naturally heard about the berserk blood potion, but great alchemist Hawkins, the skill exchange you were suggesting might have to wait a bit. Fallow was still smiling. He walked out of the crowd and stood in the middle of the lobby. Our Gilded Rose will be organizing an alchemy exhibition. The content of the exhibition will also be 2 potions, one called the Meditation Potion and the other called the Dragon Strength Potion. The lobby burst with chatter after Fallow's words. The Gilded Rose is organizing another alchemy exhibition. Had it novel been at? Many people had participated in the previous alchemy exhibition and had witnessed with their own eyes the sensation created by the Hope Potion in Thousand Sail City. They originally thought that even if the Gilded Rose had formidable technical skills, the next exhibition wouldn't be for a long time. After all, the research and development of potions would usually be counted in years. Only the previous flashing gold chamber of commerce was able to release a new potion every year. But how long has it been? Just 1 or 2 months. Excuse me, Alchemist Fallow? What are the effects of the meditation and dragon strength potions? And can you introduce their creators? Someone couldn't help asking Fallow, as this was big news after all. Coming here was truly worth it. Not only did they get to see a shameless great alchemist, but they would also get to attend the Gilded Rose's alchemy exhibition. Aha! The effect of the meditation potion is to increase the rate of mana recovery, while the effect of the dragon strength potion is to strengthen one's body. As for their creator, you're looking at him. It was me, Fallow. An insignificant alchemist dares to convene an alchemy exhibition. Hawkins immediately snorted on the side, his face filled with disdain and ridicule. He originally thought that the meditation potion and the dragon strength potion were the works of the same creator as the hope potion, making him feel anxious. But it turned out that the creator was Fallow. The work of an insignificant alchemist, how could it be comparable to the berserk blood potion? How big was the gap between an alchemist and a great alchemist? How could he not know? But as his thoughts reached this far, Hawkins suddenly became vigilant. Hold on, this was something even idiots knew. So how could he not know? Could it be that Fallow wants to get the formula and recipe of the berserk blood potion this way? Hawkins immediately felt regretful. He regretted being so full of himself a few minutes ago, saying that they could have a skill exchange even if the potion was inferior. Could it be that he wants to use this loophole? Right, this is quite possible. But he is too naive. A sneer appeared on Hawkins' face once again. He hurriedly spoke out, with ridicule before Fallow could say anything. Fallow, you wouldn't dare to use 2 shoddy potion for the recipe and formula of the berserk blood potion, would you? Do you think that I'm stupid, or are you that naive? Think about it. You are a mere alchemist. What qualifications do you have to exchange skills with me? Go look at yourself in a mirror and ask yourself if you're worth it. Ha! Great alchemist Hawkins' words are quite funny. Fallow didn't get angry. He had already sharpened himself after working for years at the Blackhorn auction house. When needed, Fallow could face any humiliation with a smile on his face. Even if his counterpart spat at him, he wouldn't mind wiping it before continuing to chat with a smile on his face. Naturally, if there was a need, Fallow could also spit at someone's face. Okay, everyone, this is a bottle of dragon strength. Fallow didn't pay attention to the gloomy Hawkins as he fished out a bottle from his bag. It was filled with a red liquid, just like the berserk blood potion. When displayed there, it looked like a pure ruby. Let's take a look at the effect of the potion. You come over. Alchemist Fallow, what do you need? House obviously knew that he was the one being called for, so he hurriedly rushed to Fallow's side, and after glancing around furtively to make sure that no one noticed, he quietly reminded Fallow, Alchemist Fallow, my name is House. Okay, House. Falo patted the young genius' shoulder before turning back to the others. Everyone, allow me to introduce you Alchemist House. He is a 5th rank mage, and this information is in the records of the Alchemist Guild. If someone isn't convinced, they can investigate anytime. Oh, and I need a swordsman, 8th or 9th rank if possible. Anyone willing to help? Me? Just as Falo's sentence ended, a strong man suddenly stood out. He seemed to be in his 30s, and he looked tough and courageous. He was carrying a great sword the size of a man. When standing in front of him, the somewhat below average House felt like a dwarf. House, drink this. Understood. Although House didn't know what Falo wanted him to do, he was willing to do anything for his idol. Thus, he grabbed the dragon strength potion and drank it in 2 gulps. All right, friend, you should introduce yourself to everyone, Falo said to the sturdy swordsman while House was drinking the potion. I am Bill, 8th rank swordsman of the Reckless Ox mercenary group. Most of those taking missions at the mercenary guild every day know me. If you don't trust me, you can ask them. Haha, Reckless Ox Bill, who doesn't know you? Some kind of laughter came from the crowd. Okay, Swordsman Bill, how about fighting our Gilded Rose's 5th rank mage in a bit? Sure, there is no problem, but Alchemist Falo, what if I injure him? My blows are a bit heavy after all. It's fine, go all out, Falo irresponsibly said while taking out a great sword from a nearby shelf and strenuously giving it to House. House, fight Swordsman Bill. Yes. House hesitated a bit, but he quickly agreed. The difference in power between an 8th rank swordsman and a 5th rank mage wasn't large. It should be fine if I use a few control spells. But something is wrong. No, hold on. Why is Alchemist Falo giving me a great sword? House's face suddenly paled as he recalled the dragon strength potion that he just drank. No way. Alchemist Falo, you want me to fight Bill at close range? Ouch, Alchemist Falo. House looked at Falo with a complicated gaze. It was filled with doubt, pleading, and fear. It seemed like he was on the verge of crying. Alchemist Falo, please tell me this is a joke, he thought, on the verge of panic. That's an 8th rank swordsman. Look at his great sword, it's bigger than me. There is no way I can fight him in close combat, is there? What are you afraid of? You just drank the dragon strength potion. What's the problem with handling an 8th rank swordsman or 2? Even if you lose your hands, feet, or head, the Gilded Rose will forever remember you. House almost let go of the great sword. So what if I'll be remembered? It's over for me if I lose my head. Okay, Swordsman Bill. House is ready. Begin. Hey, House wanted to complain. Since when was I ready? Unfortunately, House didn't have time to struggle out of this. He was caught off guard by someone pushing him from behind, which made him stumble forward. He staggered toward Bill, his greatsword falling down due to his balance being disturbed. Bill was a true 8th rank swordsman, and as a member of the Reckless Ox mercenary group, he had experienced many dangerous battles. His reaction speed couldn't be compared to that of a 5th rank mage like House who had never seen blood. Only a clang was heard as the blade was parried. This was followed by a deafening sound as Bill counterattacked, hacking downward a few times, scaring House to the point that he didn't even dare to resist, making him run away toward the crowd instead. House, if you don't hurry and counterattack, you'll lose your limbs, Falo reminded him, not at all caring about House's plight. House went pale when he heard that, thinking, you don't want me to use magic, yet you want me to strike back at an 8th rank swordsman. How am I supposed to do that? Unfortunately for him, Bill didn't give him time to breathe as the greatsword in his hand continued slashing down. With a few attacks, he forced House into a corner and followed up with a heavy strike. Fuck! House couldn't retreat anymore, so he let out the swear he had been holding back and raised the greatsword to block. Only the clang was heard. The audience couldn't bear to look. A 5th rank mage trying to block the attack of an 8th rank swordsman, and a strong one like Reckless Ox's Bill at that. Everyone felt sure that this 5th rank mage wouldn't be able to use his hands in the future. House let out a surprised yelp. He was shocked to find out that he was actually stronger than he'd imagined. It was a simple block, yet he hadn't felt any resistance from Bill's attack. No, more than that, he actually made Bill retreat a few steps. Moreover, His hands weren't shaking after that collision. He didn't feel any discomfort at all. Is this the effect of dragon strength? House thought of this and tried raising the greatsword. Now that he had calmed down, he realized that the seemingly heavy greatsword was a lot lighter than he would have thought. He was actually lifting it effortlessly, and a simple movement would create a heavy blow. The power of that blow was so heavy that even Bill had no other choice but to fall back. The Dragon Strength Potion was truly a potion that gave the strength of a dragon. After personally feeling the effects of the Dragon Strength Potion, House's fear disappeared. He held the sword in his hands tightly as he started his counterattack. The offensive power of the greatsword was so tremendous that Bill actually had to go all out to match House. The two of them kept clashing in the center of the lobby while the audience's mouths were wide open, expressing their shock. The Dragon Strength Potion could let a 5th-rank mage battle an 8th-rank swordsman evenly in a melee fight, and the latter had to go all out to be a match. Wasn't this a bit too inconceivable? Hold on, it's not just evenly matched. Some audience members quickly recalled that House was just a 5th-rank mage. He hadn't gone through proper swordsmanship training, yet he was able to contend against Bill. This was all due to the power of dragon strength. If House had done some swordsmanship training, Bill might have already collapsed. After 10 minutes, Fellow stopped the fight. Many thanks to the two of you. No problem. Alchemist Fellow, Bill was panting. Even a particularly powerful 8th-rank swordsman who was nicknamed the Ox in his mercenary group was physically exhausted after this battle. But it was different for House. He had felt no discomfort at all and was actually asking Fellow with an excited expression, Alchemist Fellow, is it the Dragon Strength Potion? Is it the Dragon Strength Potion? Yes, it's the Dragon Strength Potion. Fellow sent House away with that answer and walked to the center of the lobby once again before smiling at the pale Hawkins. Great Alchemist Hawkins, I can answer your previous question. I have no plans on using the Dragon Strength Potion to get the formula and recipe of your Berserk Blood Potion. Do you think I would be so naive? Is your potion worth an exchange of skills? You should go look in the mirror and ask yourself if you're worth it. After saying that, Fellow spat at Hawkins' feet. After the battle, there was no need to prove which of the two potions was superior. The Berserk Blood Potion only brought 10 seconds of Berserk, and under the Berserk effect, an ordinary swordsman could withstand a great swordsman. But the Dragon Strength Potion brought at least a full 10 minutes of physical enhancement. That enhancement could let a 5th-rank mage have the same physical strength as an 8th-rank swordsman. And that was the effectiveness when used on a mage. The physical strength of a swordsman was on a completely different level when compared to that of a mage, especially when the swordsman was someone like Bill, who was as strong as an ox. Mages could be considered very delicate, yet even a delicate mage was able to be evenly matched with a strong swordsman. If it had been a 5th-rank swordsman, maybe even a great swordsman would have had to rely on aura and advanced swordsmanship to suppress him. If they were only competing on physical strength, maybe even a great swordsman might not be the 5th-rank swordsman's rival. It wouldn't be fair to put the Berserk Blood Potion on the same level as the Dragon Strength Potion. This was a whole different level altogether. Great Alchemist Hawkins, you can take your Berserk Blood Potion and go back to Twin Moon Splendor. The Gilded Rose doesn't need such a skill exchange. Fellow had no plan to let Hawkins off easy. He was looking at the great alchemist with a sneer. Besides disdain and ridicule, there was also a hint of pity in his eyes. Who knows how Hawkins would react if he knew that the Dragon Strength Potion, which crushed the Berserk Blood Potion, is only a cheap imitation. Would he die from excess anger and shame? He mused. No, it isn't just the Dragon Strength Potion. Even the Berserk Blood Potion in his hands is a pitiful imitation of great Mage Merlin's potions. I really don't know where Hawkins got the courage to challenge the Gilded Rose with a mere imitation. He wanted to crush us with it, yet he was crushed by another imitation. Ignorance is bliss. No, I don't believe it. This is a scam. This is definitely a scam. He isn't a 5th-rank mage. He is a great swordsman. I saw him using aura. The sore loser, Hawkins, was in chaos. Even his words seemed incoherent. Haha, great swordsman. How could he be a great swordsman? He is obviously a sword saint. It's too late for you. Great alchemist Hawkins, you should go sleep. Laughter filled the lobby. House was a member of the Alchemist Guild. Whether he was a fifth-rank mage or not didn't matter. He was an alchemist, that much was certain. How could the Gilded Rose falsify this? Moreover, to mention Aura, Thousand Sail City would have already gone crazy if a great swordsman in his 20s had appeared. This farce finally came to an end with Hawkins' incoherent accusations. He left the Gilded Rose crestfallen, not even staying for the unveiling of the meditation potion. It was good that he left, or else his self-respect would have taken another blow with the meditation potion. Had it novel been at today's alchemy exhibition was neither promoted nor prepared, and even the start of the exhibition hadn't been announced. It could be said that it was the first time the Gilded Rose had ever been so negligent and hurried. But such a negligent and hurried alchemy exhibition instantly caused a sensation in Thousand Sail City. In the afternoon, most of the inhabitants had learnt that the Hope Potions Gilded Rose was unveiling 2 new potions. The Dragon Strength Potion, which completely outshined the Berserk Blood Potion, and the Meditation Potion, which could let mages break away from mana disturbances. Lin Yun never appeared. His study of the stone tablet had now reached a critical juncture. Lin Yun had gotten the stone tablet 10 days ago, but besides finding that it could increase the efficiency of his magic array on the first day, he didn't find anything else. However, Lin Yun didn't give up on his research because he knew that a true spirit component was full of secrets. Spending some time and energy on it was worth it. And sure enough, the time and energy Lin Yun spent finally paid off. Lin Yun kept researching the stone tablet after the old butler left the alchemy laboratory. He had originally planned to pour mana into it today. For that sake, he had prepared a small tool, a mithril support with a mana crystal, as well as 3 miniature alchemy array configurations. These 3 miniature alchemy arrays had different effects: extracting mana, controlling mana, pouring mana. Lin Yun used this improvised tool to extract mana from the mana crystal and then pour into the stone tablet. This mana test hadn't made any progress at first. The material of the stone tablet was very strange. It looked like stone, but its mana capacity was nearly limitless. In one afternoon, Lin Yun had changed mana crystals 4 times, and each of them was level 10 at the very least, so the mana contained within couldn't be considered small. Even a great mage might not be able to endure that much mana, yet the stone tablet didn't react to it, giving off the feeling of a bottomless pit. When the 4th mana crystal was emptied, Lin Yun replaced it, but he actually used an undead essence this time. This caused a change in the stone tablet. The originally ordinary stone tablet suddenly flashed and released death energy. Even Lin Yun was unable to breathe, but he reacted quickly enough. Just as the stone tablet flashed, he grabbed it and cast a flaming hand spell. The radiance instantly disappeared, and the stone tablet returned to being an ordinary piece of stone, as if what just happened had been an illusion. But Lin Yun knew that this wasn't an illusion. He could clearly see something new on the stone tablet after the light disappeared. A flaming hand the size of a fingernail. The magic symbol of the flaming hand spell had been inexplicably engraved onto the stone tablet. Lin Yun's hand nearly slipped when the magic symbol appeared, almost dropping the stone tablet for the 2nd time. Shock appeared on Lin Yun's face as he looked at that fingernail-sized magic symbol, his mind unable to focus. Sage chapter. This is the Sage chapter, he realized. The 4th chapter of the extraordinary magic tool, Book of Death, the Sage chapter, an extraordinary component that is rumored to be able to turn spells into ultimate spells at will. Had it novel been at? For a mage, the existence of ultimate spells was not inferior to the secret magic array. Every mage had spells they were especially good at. They would keep researching and improving those spells over the years, and their understanding of those spells would be far more profound than that of other mages. In their hands, the might of those spells would reach an unfathomable level. These spells were ultimate spells, but completing an ultimate spell would take a great amount of time. Even the powerhouses at the peak of the magic era didn't have many ultimate spells because it required time and energy. Naturally, there was an exception to everything. The Heaven Mage from the Ivory Tower, Bane, was that exception. That man used a total of 13 ultimate spells during a war, and with the strength of one man, defeated an entire Highland shrine. That fight defied the common sense of all mages, and 2,000 years later, after Bane had disappeared in the endless plains, mages were still discussing that battle and seeking to find the truth behind those 13 ultimate spells. That secret ultimately spread after the fall of the Ivory Tower. Bane's 13 ultimate spells didn't originate from Bane himself, but rather from one component of his extraordinary magic tool, the Book of Death. That component was the 4th chapter of the Book of Death, the Sage chapter. No wonder, Lin Yun now understood. No wonder that stone tablet power was so strange. Analysis and spell calculation were some of the essential factors of ultimate spells. Only with continuous analysis, continuous calculations, and a thorough understanding of spells' details could one make an ultimate spell have this kind of unfathomable power. And his magic array was a perfect fit for this. The complicated and detailed magic array was also quite dependent on analysis and calculations. It could be said that the Sage chapter was more important to Lin Yun than it was to Bane. Lin Yun originally had come up with a complete plan for his ultimate spells. Ultimate spells would take too much time to complete, so a mage wouldn't have many during their lifetime. Thus, Lin Yun already made a decision. He wouldn't worry about ultimate spells before becoming an archmage. Once the magic array was refined enough, he would be able to attack with elemental incarnation. That's right, elemental incarnation. Only someone from the future could know how the mages at the peak of the magic era fought. In comparison, the mages in Lin Yun's current era, such as Larry and Ryan, could only be described as incapable. He didn't even feel that powerful mages such as Solomon and Khadgar were battle-ready after talking to them. After all, these mages were just controlling mana in a simple way, while the ones at the peak of the magic era had turned battle into an instinct. Each one, without any exceptions, chose elemental incarnation as their ultimate spell. Frightening movement speed and a powerful elemental body allowed them to dominate battles with ease. After all, during the peak magic era, a 5th-rank high mage could clear out a plane like the Bone Plane in a few days, Bone Dragon included. Right now, if a group of 10 high mages went into that plane, they would only be offering a sumptuous dinner to the Bone Dragon. All in all, the mages of this era hadn't gone through many battles, and they didn't know the power of elemental incarnation. Only when the plane colonization era came would the mages understand how powerful elemental incarnation was because of the plane wars. When Lin Yun realized what he was holding, he had no choice but to change his original plan. This stone tablet meant he had a lot of choices. But after thinking about it, Heaven Mage Bane had used 13 ultimate spells in that battle. What's going on? As Lin Yun was thinking of his future plans, the magic symbol of the stone tablet was darkening. Lin Yun was startled. He didn't think too much about it and directly used mana to release that flaming hand. In a flash, dazzling flames filled Lin Yun's sight. The heat that spread from his hand couldn't be compared with a normal flaming hand spell. Its might was at least on the level of flame burst. But Lin Yun's expression sank. Not enough, not powerful enough. Lin Yun knew what a true ultimate spell should be like. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that a 1st-rank spell, such as Flaming Hand, should at least become 4th rank after being turned into an ultimate spell. Everyone knew that mages would have a leap in strength every 5th mage rank. Besides the power-up from the Mana Whirlpool and the Magic Conducting Rune, there was also the fact that mages could learn completely new spells every 5th level. Spells before a mage's 5th rank would be known as 1st-rank spells. The spells between a mage's 5th and 10th rank would be known as 2nd-rank spells. Thus, 4th-rank spells could be mastered by great mages between the 5th and 10th rank. But the Flaming Hand he had just released, though it admittedly seemed quite powerful, had yet to reach the power of an ultimate spell. Let alone the power of a 4th-rank spell, it was still a bit short of a 3rd-rank spell. What's the reason behind it? Lin Yin put down the stone tablet and sat in front of the refining table, thinking hard about it. The weakening of the magic was a problem. Moreover, why was the magic symbol darkening? Could it be that the spells put on the sage chapter slowly lose their might over time? But if it is a matter of time, wasn't this amount too short for that to happen? As he thought about it carefully, no more than half an hour passed before the magic symbol started darkening again. If they couldn't remain for more than half an hour, then how was Bane able to defeat the Highland Shrine? Finding out that the stone tablet was the sage chapter didn't clear up Lin Yun's questions. Instead, it only added more difficult ones. Could this sage chapter be defective? There is no way. Besides the problem of the ultimate spell's power, the stone tablet completely fit the description of Bane's sage chapter. If it was a defective item, wasn't the power difference too high? But if it wasn't a defective item, then why was the power of the ultimate spell lacking? It should have had the power of a 4th rank spell normally, but it couldn't even reach the 3rd rank. The difference is too great. It's a whole entire rank from Great Mage to Mage. But Lin Yun suddenly remembered after being puzzled for a long time. Hold on, Undead Essence. He had been able to activate the Sage chapter because of a piece of Undead Essence. Indeed, it has to do with Undead Essence. Had it novel been it at? He hadn't thought about it at first because he had considered it to be an ordinary component, but from another point of view, if the Sage chapter was considered as a magic tool, it would need mana to work. Every magic tool needed a source of mana to function. Even an extraordinary magic tool, like the Book of Death, was no exception. Wouldn't the Sage chapter also need power to function? Lin Yun had already understood most of it by this time. The Sage chapter needed energy to function, but that energy wasn't mana. It was soul fire, the soul fire of the undead. Undead essence itself was the material remaining after soul fire was cooled down. He had been able to activate the stone tablet because of the remaining soul fire within the undead essence, but the amount was too low, and because it had come from a lowly skeleton warrior. It wasn't enough to transform the flaming hand into an ultimate spell. There might have been other reasons that I do not understand yet, but I should be pretty close. After thinking about it, Lin Yun fished out a piece of undead essence from his bag. He wanted to use that self-made tool to pour more energy into the stone tablet. But there was something wrong with the undead essence he just pulled out. The previous undead essence had smoothly awakened the Sage chapter through the 3 miniature arrays. But this time, the undead essence only approached the Sage chapter before a small soul fire could be seen separating from the essence and entering the Sage chapter, followed by the undead essence turning into black dust, which scattered into the air. Lin Yun didn't do any of that intentionally. The Sage chapter had been the one in control. Could it be that the undead essence not only provided power to the stone tablet, but also awakened the Sage chapter? Lin Yun felt that this was quite a reasonable assumption. The Sage chapter he had gotten from the Death Garden had actually been in some sort of slumber. Although he had induced some sort of reaction with his flaming hand, it had only been an instinctual reaction. The Sage chapter only started awakening when he took out the undead essence and fed it to the stone tablet, revealing some of its power. But that awakening was far from over. Lin Yun knew that at this point the Sage chapter was only in the process of awakening. It was still far from fully awakening. It was clear that the current Sage chapter was unable to manifest itself. This was an extraordinary component, which could have power easily be above true spirit. The fact that it couldn't manifest itself meant that his research of the Sage chapter was still far from being complete. Maybe the soul fire isn't enough. Lin Yun could clearly see that soul fires were very important to that stone tablet, or else the slumbering Sage chapter wouldn't have been awakened by one. Since he came to that conclusion, Lin Yun straightforwardly took out all his undead essences and watched as the soul fires came out of them to enter the Sage chapter, one after the other. All the undead essences in Lin Yun's hands crumbled away into black powder in a short time. Lin Yun then cast another flaming hand. The magic symbol on the Sage chapter was clearly brighter than before. When Lin Yun triggered it with mana, the might of the spell released had reached the 3rd rank. Still not enough. After confirming that the might of that flaming hand still hadn't reached the 4th rank, Lin Yun shook his head. But there was no disappointment on his face this time, because he knew that he was already on the correct path. The Sage chapter could recover the power of an extraordinary component. It was only a matter of time. Simply because Lin Yun had the bone plane. His plan had changed. Lin Yun had originally planned on entering the bone plane once he had 5 magic arrays, since that would be when his power would rival that of High Mage. By then, even if the slumbering bone devil woke up, Lin Yun was confident that he wouldn't lose. But he couldn't wait anymore because the Sage chapter needed a large amount of soul fire. And the Sage chapter's importance wasn't any less than that of his magic array. The sooner his Sage chapter awakened, the sooner his magic array's efficiency would increase, and the sooner the might of the ultimate spells would increase. The more efficient the magic array became, the stronger his ultimate spells would become. This would be the foundation that he would rely on to explore the prince's tomb. The prince's tomb was where the reincarnation I was. Lin Yun unhesitantly made his decision. He would enter the bone plane once again, but this time he wouldn't go for the nether iron. He would go there to hunt for more soul fire. After Lin Yun came out of the alchemy laboratory, he greeted Falo and put him in charge of the group of alchemists before leaving the Gilded Rose in a hurry, riding a carriage home. After arriving home, he went through the passage to the hidden chamber. Now that they had recovered for a few months, the abyssal magic diamonds were already glittering. Lin Yun estimated that with the Frost Lich's heart, he would be able to stay in the bone plane for 3 hours this time. Lin Yun took a deep breath, stood in front of the Frost Lich heart, and chanted the incantation to open the planar path. After a short spatial distortion, Lin Yun once again set foot onto the bone plane. The dark crimson crescent moon had already fallen, but the gloomy sky was still giving off a suffocating feeling. As a sea of black clouds was covering the land and cold breezes carrying a rotten smell were blowing past, Lin Yun couldn't help pulling at his black robe. The soft and damp soil under his feet that was mixed with rotten weeds and dead leaves was emitting a disgusting stench. The surroundings of the dark iron vein were filled with a sea of skeleton warriors, and although the bone devil was still sleeping underground, the death aura it was emitting was tangible. Even Lin Yun felt that the atmosphere was suffocating. This kind of high-level undead was very powerful, its strength nearing the high mage rank. It could create a crushing pressure simply by emitting its death aura. Fortunately, Lin Yun didn't have any intention to provoke the bone devil on this trip. Lin Yun's target was the sea of skeleton warriors. Lin Yun had cast Detect Undead the second his feet touched the ground. 10,000 undead warriors at the very least. Lin Yun was a great mage now, so his detection spells were far sharper than before, and he also had a better understanding of the Black Wasteland. In a short moment, all the nearby undead creatures appeared in Lin Yun's mind. The entire Black Wasteland and over 10,000 skeleton warriors were divided into several dozen areas of various sizes. Apart from the Bone Devil's area, Lin Yun marked the others as hunting grounds. The first one Lin Yun went for was the nearest area from the plain path. Nearly 50 skeleton warriors were gathered there. Lin Yun chanted a few lines, and a flame barrier instantly rose up, followed by a flame burst landing exactly in the path of the skeleton warriors. An explosion thundered out as flames blossomed amidst the dozens of skeletons. At that moment, only flames could be seen in the sky as they fell onto the Black Wasteland. About a dozen skeletons were unable to move, and they eventually turned to ashes from the unforgiving heat. Right as he cast that flame burst spell, Lin Yun was already prepared. 2 lights, one blue and one red, were spiraling around him, the ice fire shield. Lin Yun knew that a flame barrier couldn't completely stop the undead life forms, which were unafraid of death. He would have to endure the crazy counterattack from the skeleton warriors now that they had been alerted. Sure enough, a dozen skeletons were already on the move before the flames of the flame burst fell down. The flaming barrier was unable to stop their path. After initially losing some among their number, they quickly rushed out of the flame barrier's encirclement. They were less than 50 meters away from Lin Yun. Had it novel been at, Lin Yun kept chanting, casting one flame spear after the other at the skeleton warriors at the forefront. He then started to retreat while preparing another flame burst. Lin Yin had only been using fire magic so far. Those combat techniques came from explanation of the Max formula. The Flame Tyrant believed that in a fight against the undead, it was better for one to use fire magic, because firstly, fire magic itself was the bane of the undead, and secondly, using a great amount of fire spells would rouse the fire elements in the surroundings, increasing the elemental affinity for fire magic. This would create an environment suitable for a mage's battle, which would not only increase the might of fire magic, but would also weaken the undead. That battle strategy could sum up the entirety of the Flame Tyrant Max's life experiences of battling the undead. After falling back for 10 meters, Lin Yun's flame burst was ready to be cast again. Now he was only waiting for those skeletons to approach so that he could bathe them in fire. But at this time, the group of skeleton warriors that was rushing towards him suddenly stopped. Moreover, their soul fires all twitched, just like candle flames flickering in the wind. It looked like they would extinguish with just the slightest disturbance. Then, the skeleton warriors started retreating. What the? Lin Yun was shocked by the change, but he couldn't just watch them. Almost as if it was a reflex, Lin Yun forcefully interrupted his flame burst as he was about to chant the last sentence, and turned it into a flame barrier instead. The flame barrier rose up, yet the retreating skeletons didn't hesitate at all, rushing straight through the raging flames. None of the skeleton warriors turned back, as if they felt that Lin Yun was more frightening than a flame burst or a flame barrier, as if they would rather go through the flame barrier than turn around and confront Lin Yun. The damage dealt by the flame barrier was shocking. With the active fire elements, the power of that flame barrier had risen an entire rank. 30 skeleton warriors went in, but less than 10 came out. Lin Yun only had to use a few more flame spears to deal with the remaining skeleton warriors. What just happened? Lin Yun was suspicious as he took out the Sage Chapter. In a flash, a dozen nimble soul fires flew over to him and quickly merged with the Sage Chapter. Normally, Lin Yun would use a spell to test the power of the Sage Chapter, but he didn't care about it right now. His mind was totally focused on figuring out the shocking scene that had just happened. Lin Yun couldn't understand why the skeleton warriors who were rushing at him suddenly turned around and ran away. Their soul fires were flickering. What did it mean? If I'm not wrong, that would only happen to the undead when they are on the verge of death or are completely terrified, he recalled. They certainly weren't on the verge of death. They were running very quickly when they turned around. They must have had plenty of energy, he reasoned. But if they weren't on the verge of death, wouldn't that mean that they were utterly frightened? This sounded a bit unreasonable. Everyone knew that the undead didn't fear death and couldn't succumb to fatigue. Even if they knew that a deathly trap awaited them, they would still jump in with both feet. Only stronger, undead life forms could instill fear in an undead creature. But did Lin Yun look like an undead life form? Could it be caused by the Sage Chapter? No, that's wrong. The Sage Chapter had been in his pocket all along. This wasn't an ordinary pocket. It was one of the things that had been useful to him during his life back at the end of time. So when he transmigrated, one of the first items he personally enchanted was this black robe, and more importantly, its pockets. He used a total of 3 alchemy arrays on them. Besides temperature regulation in order to preserve potions, it also had the effect of sealing mana fluctuations. The Sage Chapter had been in his pocket earlier and had been unable to absorb the soul fires. So how could it have affected the skeleton warriors? In order to confirm his hypothesis, Lin Yun had to do a test. He first put the Sage Chapter on the ground and then used a delayed, exploding firebomb to lure in a skeleton warrior. When one of them passed by, it completely ignored the Sage Chapter, not even giving it a passing glance. After dealing with it by tossing out a flame spear, Lin Yun stooped down and retrieved the Sage Chapter. This test confirmed his previous hypothesis, that the skeleton warrior's fear was unrelated to the Sage Chapter. But if it's not the Sage Chapter, what is it? Lin Yun carefully recalled his recent adventures. The only matter related to the undead was the Prince Tomb in the Poison Fog Canyon, and the Death Garden contained within was the most suspicious. But the only thing he did at the Death Garden was retrieving the Sage Chapter. Hold on. Lin Yun was startled as he thought of something. What if the Sage chapter wasn't the only thing that came out of the Death Garden? It's an ability I received from the Death Garden. As he started thinking of it that way, Lin Yun remembered one person. After the Sovereign of Death, Sandro, there was the second powerhouse to conquer the undead plane. The Heaven Mage who withstood Sandro's undead legion by himself, Charles the Conqueror. When he was 8 years old, his entire family was killed by Sandro's undead legion. Luckily, Charles had managed to escape and survive for 10 years as one of the dregs of society. Clinging onto his hate of Sandro, he managed to become a mage at the age of 20. In reality, a 20-year-old mage wasn't that special, and at the time, Charles could only enter a second-tier mercenary group. But it was within that second-tier mercenary group that Charles soared. He became a great mage at 21, high mage at 25, and he managed to enter the ranks of archmages at 30. Charles's legend started from that point on. Charles took that second-tier mercenary group and conquered several dozen planes in 100 years. Through glorious achievements, he earned the title of Conqueror. Ultimately, Charles entered the undead plane alone and used his own power to crush the undead legion that Sandro had left behind, cleansing the entire undead plane of its undead inhabitants. That battle shook all of No Scent. Charles was deified, but despite having conquered so many planes, he didn't hesitate and he followed Sandro's footsteps, entering the endless plane through a floating spatial distortion. Not a single communication was sent back to No Scent since then. Addit Novel Benedette. These two men were legendary existences in the entire magic era. Lin Yun had read that Charles the Conqueror had also entered a death garden. Moreover, he had publicly admitted to receiving a reward from it, an ability known as Undead Predator. In those days, the Undead Predator ability allowed Charles to naturally exude a sort of pressure when facing the undead. Even elder ghost dragons and skeleton titans, those kinds of legendary existences, would shiver in front of Charles because he had slaughtered thousands upon thousands of the undead. Every undead life form would be instilled with a deep fear when facing him. Although both Sovereign of Death Sandro and Charles the Conqueror entered the Endless Plane, the legends they left in No Scent didn't disappear. Who knew how many powerful mages were looking for death gardens, all because of the Undead Contract and Undead Predator abilities. Especially Undead Predator, because all mages would agree that even though Charles's greatest pride was that he had fought the undead all his life, the greatest regret was also that he had fought the undead all his life. If there had been some other types of life forms among Charles's enemies, he might have found out that his ability affected more than just the undead. Unfortunately, it could never be proved, as the Undead Predator ability disappeared alongside Charles. But Lin Yun might have the opportunity now. He was fairly certain that the ability he possessed was most likely the Undead Predator ability that Charles the Conqueror had possessed. It was no wonder that he didn't feel it. Undead Predator was different from Undead Contract. Undead Contract was an active skill, while Undead Predator was a passive skill. In other words, Undead Predator would remain in effect as long as he was alive and wouldn't bring any change to his body. As for the reason that he got that ability, he could more or less guess. That unlucky master craftsman wasn't wrong. Every choice made in the illusion might affect the rewards. Lin Yun had been worried at the time. He had kept casting in the illusion, always fighting, not making any choice, only fighting. He had been worried that he would gain nothing because of that. But Lin Yun finally understood. Continuously casting, continuously fighting, this was also a choice. This is a pleasant surprise. Lin Yun had thought that his only reward from the tomb was the unknown stone tablet, but he then had some fortuitous surprises over the course of the past 10 days. First, he learned that the stone tablet was actually the Sage chapter of the Book of Death, and now, he figured out that he gained the Undead Predator ability. In Lin Yun's eyes, Undead Predator was far better than Sandro's Undead Contract. Addit Novel Benedette. After all, Undead Contract was tailored for necromancers. If a non-necromancer like Lin Yun obtained that ability, they would only be able to summon a few extra life forms. Without necromancy spells to strengthen them, the summons wouldn't be that powerful. But Undead Predator was different. Lin Yun was now sitting on the entire bone plane, so the existence of the Undead Predator ability would allow him to conquer the entire bone plane faster. Once the Book of Death was in his hands, with the addition of the Sage chapter, Lin Yun's fighting strength would be able to reach a shocking level. Even a high mage wouldn't be Lin Yun's match. Moreover, the Undead Predator ability still had secrets that could be researched. Those mages from the peak of the magic era all believed that the Undead Predator ability wasn't merely limited to the undead. Lin Yun would be the first to question the merits of an unproven theory, but he now had a lot of time to experiment with Undead Predator and see whether that theory was correct. Lin Yun was more relaxed after the fight thanks to the Undead Predator. What he wanted to do now was to find the place with the largest amount of skeleton warriors and use his highest rank spells to bomb them indiscriminately, not having to worry about a potential counterattack due to the fear created by the pressure from Undead Predator. As he put his plan into motion, they often rushed at him initially, but then froze foolishly or tried to escape. This is simply a harvest. In a quick 2 hours, the Sage chapter absorbed over 1,000 soul fires, and aside from the high mana consumption, Lin Yun hadn't met any troubles or threats. The ice fire shield hadn't been breached at all. Lin Yun still had about 1 hour left. He prepared to go harvest another group of skeleton warriors, but then he suddenly discovered that he had unconsciously approached the nether iron vein. Last time he came to the bone plane, it was night time, and his light spell had only been able to illuminate a 10-meter area, so his only choice had been to rely on a half-solidified mage eye. Naturally, he hadn't been able to see everything clearly. This time, although the sky was covered by a sea of clouds, it was still daytime, so after casting a mage eye, Lin Yun was able to clearly observe the nether iron vein. The nether iron vein was on a plain surrounded by skeleton warriors, with a dense death aura being emitted from underground, and the bone devil was slumbering at the densest part of the death aura. The nether iron vein was over 100 meters away, completely exposed to the surface, the kind of vein that miners loved most. Hardly any effort would be needed to easily exploit it. Moreover, the resources contained in that nether iron vein were very shocking. Even from this distance, Lin Yun could feel the powerful mana fluctuations. Some came from the nether iron vein itself, and some came from the magic gems born from it. Lin Yun took a deep breath and suppressed the urge to provoke the bone devil right now, and he forced himself to look away. But as the mage eye flew across, Lin Yun discovered a dark cave at the end of the nether iron vein with some blood-stained clothes at its entrance. Fuck! Lin Yun's eyes suddenly widened at the unexpected sight. What did that mean? Those clothes proved that Lin Yun wasn't the first person to enter the bone plane. Naturally, the human was already long gone. Being wounded in the bone plane was no different from death. Under the assault of endless death energy, a small prick on one's finger would be deadly. In fact, it wasn't just the bone plane. Any plane was like that. The completely different environments made it so that no one could stay in foreign planes for a long time, including the formidable mages of the peak magic era. This was also the real reason that even the self-proclaimed god mages could only fall when Nascent's mana was exhausted. In those final years, who knew how many mages went insane trying to find a way out? Unfortunately, no one was able to survive in those planes. Only mages on the same level as Sandro and Charles were able to struggle forward, fleeing to the endless plane through a spatial crack. But what awaited them was an unknown fate. It might be a new world, or it might doom them to drift for all eternity. In short, no matter who the owner of those clothes was, that person was most likely already dead. This was almost a certainty, but Lin Yun still felt that he should take a look. After all, they would belong to a human that had come to the bone plane before him, over 1,000 years before the 3 young mages of the Ivory Tower. Lin Yun really wanted to know who that was. With that in mind, Lin Yun controlled the mage eye to fly towards the entrance of the cave and explore it. But suddenly, Lin Yun's sight darkened. It couldn't. Lin Yun froze, and the mage eye shockingly faded away. The mage eye had been stopped by some sort of magic barrier. A mage eye could be said to be the most fragile among mage's constructs. It was based on the condensation of a mage's mana, and it would collapse when met with a bit of mana interference. Lin Yun had met many situations where a mage eye would collapse, so this wasn't something to fuss about. But the collapse of this mage eye made Lin Yun feel suspicious. Bloodstained clothes were strange enough, but there was also still mana remaining in that cave. Lin Yun thought for a bit before casting a few spells. He used Haste, Stone Skin, Conceal, Aura, and Undead Camouflage, casting the buffs on himself one after the other. Lin Yun then started slowly walking toward that dark cave. Fortunately, there weren't many skeletons around after the harvest earlier. Even if one or two occasionally emerged in front of Lin Yun with his undead predator skill, it was only a matter of 1 or 2 flame spears. 10 minutes later, Lin Yun had bypassed the nether iron vein without disturbing the bone devil and was now standing in front of the bloodstained clothes. At this time, Lin Yun could clearly see that the bloodstains on the clothes had already dried up, only leaving some darkened areas. Lin Yun didn't touch the bloody clothes because he was aware that in a place like the bone plane, which was filled with death energy, everything would decay 10 times faster. The bloodstains had already dried up and it had been seriously eroded. If Lin Yun touched it, it would turn into a pile of ashes. Lin Yun crouched and carefully inspected the dried-up bloodstains. He then found out that the bloodstains were leading deeper inside the cave. This made Lin Yun frown. Could that unknown person have fled into the cave after being injured? If that was the case, then this cave might not be that simple. Looks like I really have to go in. Lin Yun thought for a bit and cast a light spell inside the cave. He lowered his head and entered. This cave was very narrow and was extending downward. The precipitous slope made it hard for Lin Yun to proceed. After 10 meters, Lin Yun felt some abnormal mana fluctuations. These were definitely the mana fluctuations that disturbed the mage eye. The cave was under the nether iron mine. As Lin Yun walked down, he could see that both sides of the wall had a lot of exposed nether iron and of high quality. If an outstanding blacksmith smelted those, the ore would easily be turned into exceptional materials for magic armors and magic weapons. Lin Yun spent no less than 10 minutes walking down the sharp and narrow slope. The path became flat and wide when he reached the bottom of the cave. But Lin Yun frowned. There was a skeleton in front of him. Those strange mana fluctuations were coming from the skeleton. Sure enough, Lin Yun knew that his previous guess was correct the moment his eyes fell onto the skeleton. The unknown man had fled into the cave after being injured. This certainly seemed to be the case, but after thinking about it, he felt that this wasn't what an ordinary person would do. A regular person wounded in a place like the bone plane chose to rush into the depths of this cave instead of leaving to recuperate. This seemed a bit strange. Unless there was something special in that cave. Lin Yun secretly raised his vigilance and crouched down in front of the skeleton before gently flipping it over, which revealed the source of the abnormal mana fluctuations, a magic staff. No way. With a magic staff in his hand, Lin Yun knew that things were serious. That magic staff was far more powerful than he had imagined. This was a genuine spiritual magic tool, an existence that already held spiritual wisdom. To master this kind of staff, one needed to be a high mage at the very least, and not just any high mage could. Only an existence at the peak of high mages like Solomon could completely master something like this spiritual magic tool. Fortunately, and most likely due to the passage of time, the spirit of the magic staff was already slumbering, so Lin Yun only felt a faint resistance after picking up the staff. The staff didn't react after Lin Yun poured mana in to suppress the faint resistance. Lin Yun had been examining that spiritual magic tool. Once a magic tool reached the spiritual level, it would take on another shape. At this point, it couldn't be compared to excellent and inheritance magic tools. Just based on a shaft made of burning spirit wood, the value of the magic staff could be compared to the abyssal magic diamond. Burning spirit wood was known as an unending source of mana. Even a small piece would provide an unending flow of mana. But this wasn't the most important thing. The most important part of that magic staff was the precious gem inlaid at the top. At it novel Benedette. That was a fist-sized elemental amber. Holy shit. Lin Yun was speechless as he looked at it. He had one elemental amber already, but it was extremely lacking compared to that one on the staff. Whether it was size or purity, they simply weren't on the same level. The amount of mana that could be stored in that elemental amber was at least 10 times that of Lin Yun's current elemental amber. 10 times. That would be the increased Lin Yun's pool of usable mana, which was already formidable. And the most important function of elemental amber wasn't mana storage. Rather, the most important function was to store spells. Lin Yun estimated that he could store 5 high mage rank spells within that elemental amber. As long as he had those 5 high mage rank spells in hand, even if he didn't wake up the spirit of the magic staff, he would still be able to fight the Bone Devil. Naturally, getting a source of high mage rank spells was the problem. After all, not every high mage was willing to pay such a huge price. But this wasn't a problem for Lin Yun, because he now held the Sage Chapter. If he couldn't use high mage rank spells, he could totally use ultimate spells instead. For Lin Yun, who held the Sage Chapter, the importance of this magic staff was even higher than that of a spiritual magic tool. But Lin Yun's frown resurfaced when his eyes fell onto the back of the staff. It was due to the black lightning symbol engraved there. Fuck! The Black Tower! Lin Yun was startled. Others might not know, but how could he not know about that symbol that was famous during the peak of the magic era? The black lightning represented one of the strongest magic powers of the realm. It fought the Cloud Tower for over 10,000 years without a victor emerging from either side. And the person that fell there was a high mage from the Black Tower. The Black Tower of this era was just one of the many forces of the kingdom, and it wasn't considered a peak force in the eyes of the masses. But Lin Yun knew that in at most 10 years, the Black Tower would quickly rise and become one of the 2 strongest forces in the kingdom alongside the Cloud Tower. At its peak, the Black Tower controlled the entire eastern side of the kingdom and a few dozen planes of all sizes. It bred countless powerful mages, and their fighting strength could be rated as being amidst the top forces of all of No Scent. Lin Yun had already made some speculations when the mage I first found those blood-stained clothes. Lin Yun had been wondering who had been the first to enter the Bone Plane. Was it this house's former master, or the following master, Loch Merlin? But Lin Yun hadn't considered that it might be a mage from the Black Tower. Although the current Black Tower wasn't as formidable as it would be 10 years later, it would definitely have 1 or 2 archmages. If they learnt of the existence of the Bone Plane, Lin Yun would never have the opportunity to take advantage of this place. Furthermore, Lin Yun clearly remembered that the Black Tower never controlled the Bone Plane. Could it be that this mage met misfortune in the Bone Plane before he could inform the Black Tower? At it novel Benedette. The more Lin Yun thought about it, the more strange it seemed. He scrutinized the spiritual magic staff in his hand while considering the situation. Hold on. Lin Yun's eyes fell onto the back of the magic staff. He had been startled by the black lightning symbol and hadn't taken the time to examine it carefully. He understood after taking a longer look at the symbol. There was a lance crossing through the middle of the black lightning symbol. I see. Lin Yun was now able to relax. Lance and lightning. That was the symbol used by the Black Tower around 300 years ago. At that time, the highest authority of the Black Tower was the Council of the Seven. Battlemage Gogas had owned 3 of the 7 seats, until the Black Tower underwent a major change. Battlemage Gogas announced that he was splitting from the Black Tower to migrate 250 kilometers into the Savage Highland. From that point on, the Black Tower forever lost the lance symbol. In other words, that pile of bones was over 300 years old. Lin Yun immediately understood when he recalled this. Indeed, that unfortunate mage hadn't been able to send news to the Black Tower. The only thing that the Black Tower might know was that there was something unusual about his house, but they surely weren't expecting that there was a planar path leading to the Bone Plane. And the dramatic changes happening at the Black Tower due to Gogas' departure took a bit over 200 years to settle. Would the Black Tower have left a place as fertile as the Bone Plane alone if they knew about it? But it seemed that some people had started paying attention to this place in recent years. Lin Yun couldn't help frowning while thinking of that. The Manchi family had been targeting his house continuously ever since he transmigrated. From Ferrio's debt to the actions of Larry, the ninth-rank mage of the Viper Nest, how could Lin Yun not see it? Whether it was Ferrio or Larry, there was the shadow of the Manchi family behind them. Lin Yun even suspected whether Lochmerlin's shipwreck was linked to the Manchi family. But fortunately, it was only the Manchi family for now. In other words, the entire Black Tower wasn't paying attention to this location. Only a powerful member of the Black Tower was. That powerful person was most likely someone with a seat at the council. Otherwise, how could he easily transfer two great alchemists to serve the Manchi family? Lin Yun's heart was a bit less strained as he arrived at this conclusion. It wouldn't be a big issue as long as it wasn't the entire Black Tower. The only thing Lin Yun lacked was time. There would be nothing to worry about if he had the time to get the Book of Death. That extraordinary magic tool was not only the crystallization of the Bone Plane's power, but it was also the control center of the entire Bone Plane. As long as he had the Book of Death in his hands, Lin Yun would be able to completely control the Bone Plane. No person or power would have the chance to touch the Bone Plane. What they would be facing then wouldn't be Lin Yun, nor the Bone Plane, but rather the universe's plane laws. Lin Yun was now racing against time. Once he had 5 magic arrays, and once he had the fighting strength of a high mage, only then would Lin Yun be qualified to seek the Book of Death. When he held the Book of Death, Lin Yun wouldn't even need the planar path anymore because the Book of Death was the key to the Bone Plane. Lin Yun would be able to enter the Bone Plane as he wished, and he would also be able to control anything he wanted in the Bone Plane. At that time, it would be that powerful member of the Black Tower that should be worried. Lin Yun could use the power of the entire Bone Plane to deal with him. But too much time was needed to reach 5 magic arrays. If Lin Yun relied on his own ability to set them up, it might take a couple of years, and even that would be considered extremely short. The only shortcut was the reincarnation eye in the Prince Tomb. Looks like I have to set up a caravan and leave for the Poison Fog Canyon once again after finishing up here. After making sure there was no danger, Lin Yun collected the staff with a feeling of relief and then kept searching the old remains. There was something strange about it. That skeleton had been in the Bone Plane for at least 300 years, but it showed no signs of becoming undead. After all, this was a place filled with death energy, so the skeleton normally would have been eroded by the abundant energy. But he had been in the plane for over 2 hours, so he didn't have the time to pursue this line of questioning. He could only finish plundering the remains as fast as he could before leaving for the Bone Plane. Otherwise, he would be stuck in the Bone Plane once the planar path closed. Unfortunately, the rest of the harvest was far inferior to the previous one. Lin Yun searched for a long time and only found an inheritance level ring. But he couldn't test the effect just yet. He would only be able to slowly study it after going back to the Gilded Rose. After making sure that he hadn't overlooked anything, Lin Yun got up and checked the surroundings with his light spell before planning to return to the surface. Who would have thought that this would create a problem? Parts of the wall behind Lin Yun fell down as the light shone. Immediately after, Lin Yun felt the ground shivering under his feet. What? Lin Yun's eyes became round. What could create such a situation? What could cause an earthquake to occur in the cave? It didn't take long for Lin Yun to come up with the answer. Bone Devil. This is definitely the Bone Devil waking up. What else could create such a big movement in this black wasteland? I celebrated too soon. I was so happy after getting that staff. So the damn Bone Devil woke up to cool me down. Lin Yun almost broke into a run. But a mere great mage in his current state was but a dish in front of a Bone Devil. If he was too slow, he might lose a few body parts. If he didn't take advantage of the Bone Devil's momentary torpor after just waking up, would he have to just wait for death? No. Just as Lin Yun was about to move, he realized his mistake. The more anxious he was, the faster he would lose his mind. The Bone Devil was awakening outside. If he thoughtlessly ran outside, wouldn't he run into it? The Bone Devil wouldn't have to do anything. Lin Yun would be serving himself up for breakfast. This isn't like last time Last time he had been able to rely on elemental incarnation and the sea of fire to break away from the bone devil. He didn't have sufficient preparation this time. If he couldn't break free from the bone devil in under an hour, wouldn't he become stuck in the bone plane? This is no good. I can't run outside. Lin Yun controlled the light and quickly searched around the cave before finding a narrow passage on the other side and immediately rushed into that passage. Lin Yun wasn't planning to get away through this route. That would be almost impossible. An underground cave like this could lead anywhere, whether to the surface or to a dead end. If Lin Yun could choose where the path led, he would definitely choose to escape to the surface, but he couldn't be that lucky. Had it novel been at, Lin Yun only planned to hide in that passage, waiting until the bone devil disappeared before looking for a way to return to no scent. As for where that path led, it didn't matter to Lin Yun. After going through the passage, Lin Yun stopped controlling the light and had it float 2 meters in front of him while he held the magic staff with his now empty right hand. Besides the Sage Chapter, the most powerful item in Lin Yun's hand was that spiritual magic staff. Even if the spirituality of the staff was still slumbering, Lin Yun could clearly feel the mana coming from the burning spirit tree in his hand, pouring into the elemental amber continuously. That feeling could be compared to a beautiful note of music. It made people unconsciously feel intoxicated. But this time, Lin Yun had no time to appreciate its beauty. He quickly took out the Sage Chapter, storing 2 fire arrow spells in a row. Lin Yun relaxed when he saw the 2 fire arrow symbols. The thousands of soul fires he had harvested truly weren't wasted. Those soul fires were already enough for 2 fire arrow spells to be upgraded to ultimate spells. These 2 ultimate spells were the last card Lin Yun prepared. If the bone devil followed his aura into the cave, then Lin Yun would have to do his best with what he had. Under normal circumstances, Lin Yun's current strength wasn't enough to contend with the bone devil. He could only rely on the narrow terrain as well as the 2 ultimate spells stored in the Sage Chapter. After finishing his preparations, Lin Yun stopped and took a deep breath as he calmly waited for the final outcome. There were only 2 possibilities right now. The bone devil could return to its slumber after going crazy for a while, or it might sense the aura of a living being and follow Lin Yun into the cave. The first would naturally be the ideal choice for Lin Yun. The second would mean that he would have to put his life on the line. The seconds ticked by as the cave continued shaking. But Lin Yun's expression gradually darkened. He could hear them, the footsteps of the bone devil slowly getting closer. Those heavy footsteps echoed in Lin Yun's head. Each step would put more pressure on his mind. Then, a world-shaking roar echoed, making the entire cave tremor. Fuck, Lin Yun cursed. He knew that the bone devil had found him. That roar was filled with anger at someone infiltrating its territory, but it was also filled with the excitement of discovering prey. It was the same roar as the previous time. Lin Yun looked at the passage in front of him, then once again at the empty cave, and after thinking for a short time, he decided to go a bit deeper. He hoped to make it harder for the bone devil to track him by putting some distance between them, and he also planned to use the narrow passage to help him if he had to go all out against the bone devil. After all, he had 2 ultimate spells in hand. He didn't have the power for a fight against a bone devil. Strange, some doubt appeared on Lin Yun's face after walking a few dozen meters in. The pathway was too smooth compared to the outside. It didn't look naturally formed. It seemed man-made. Sure enough, some traces of ironware could be seen on the surface of the walls. Could the Black Tower's high mage have carved it? He wondered. No way, a high mage wouldn't have that kind of physical power. It would appear that the walls had been carved by alchemy puppets. But if it had been done by alchemy puppets, then why couldn't he find the remains of such puppets outside? Even if this was the bone plane with its abundant death energy, alchemy puppets couldn't have eroded to nothing in just a few hundred years. Could it be that there's still more if I go deeper? Lin Yun decided that in any case, going deeper inside was the best solution to avoid the bone devil. If he really found those alchemy puppets and found a way to reboot them, he might be able to use them to dig an alternate path to the surface. With these thoughts in mind, Lin Yun went about 30 meters deeper. At that time, The Bone Devil seemed to have found the source of the aura of a living being and was now going through the precipitous slope, slowly entering the cave's depths. Heavy footsteps, a sinister roar. Hearing both put huge pressure on Lin Yun's mind, but he forced himself not to look back. Among the undead, Bone Devils were very sensitive to humans. Just the act of turning around might actually give away his exact location. Lin Yun continued walking along the narrow passage, and just as he was wondering how much farther it would go, it became more spacious. Afterwards, Lin Yun saw a figure that was wearing plate armor and holding a lance. Plate armor, lance? Gaugas battle mage. Lin Yun was startled and subconsciously raised the spiritual magic staff with flame-burst flames flickering at its tip. But he immediately realized that something was off. Lin Yun noticed that the armored silhouette holding the lance was actually motionless. It really was a legendary Gaugas battle mage, and he wasn't moving at all in front of Lin Yun's flame burst. What did that mean? Could it be another skeleton? Lin Yun interrupted the cast of his flame burst while feeling a bit doubtful, but he didn't dare to be careless. He held the sage chapter in his hand tightly. If anything went amiss, the fire arrows within would be activated. Those were genuine ultimate spells, and their might would far surpass that of his flame burst. This wasn't Lin Yun being overly careful. These Gaugas battle mages could be considered quite unconventional among the entire magic civilization. They never learned any magic knowledge or did any magic research. They didn't even have their own written language, a group of true barbarians. Their societal system was still at the tribal stage. But it was this group of barbarians that was blessed with innate magic skill. Almost every Gaugas battle mage was born with mage-level mana accumulation. Once they reached adulthood, that mana accumulation would reach great mage level. It had to be mentioned that this would occur without meditation or training. It was all innate mana. This was enough to make ordinary mages envious. The most frightening part was that Gaugas battle mages were born with extremely tyrannical physical strength. They could use all kinds of weapons and all heavy armors. When they joined a battlefield, it was as if armored beasts had joined the fray, and in addition, those armored beasts could fire all kinds of spells. Facing such an abnormal existence, Lin Yun felt that no matter how careful he was, it couldn't be considered excessive. Lin Yun remained alert as he cast Detect Magic. No mana fluctuations, no signs of life. Lin Yun let out a sigh of relief. Whether that silhouette was a Gaugas battle mage or not, there was no danger. Lin Yun finally relaxed the hand holding the sage chapter and moved past. The Bone Devil's footsteps were already drawing closer. That sinister roar echoed once again in Lin Yun's ears. But the more terrifying thing was that after expanding out, the passage didn't continue any farther. The path had come to an end. Lin Yun's only course of action now was waiting. Waiting for the Bone Devil to give up on tracking him, or for it to find him. Time ticked by, second after second. The cave began shaking even more violently, and rocks fell from the ceiling, making Lin Yun feel depressed. But Lin Yun couldn't worry about this right now. After discovering that there was no way out, Lin Yun cast a Mage Eye. Without the interference of the magic staff, the Mage Eye smoothly retraced his way back. The Mage Eye found the Bone Devil at the middle of the slope. Compared to his first trip to the Bone Plain, where Lin Yun barely had the time to look at the Bone Devil, this time he was able to pay closer attention. He saw a huge, several-meter-tall body entirely made up of thick bones, its sharp bones flickering with a faint radiance in the dark. There were several dozen phosphorus lights on its body, each one scattering a berserk mana fluctuation. The soul fire within the skull was the size of a fist, emitting an enormous death aura. Even Lin Yun, who was on the other side of the slope, felt stifled. Two lights were crazily pulsating in the eye sockets, moving back and forth in the dark cave, seemingly searching for the origin of the living aura. Damn ghost. Lin Yun knew that he wouldn't be able to escape this time. The Bone Devil didn't look like it would give up. After giving up on his hopes of being lucky, Lin Yun actually calmed down. He looked around, his brain working at a crazy speed. If I fight the Bone Devil here, I might have some chances. Adet novel Benedet. Honestly, he wasn't too confident. Although the passage was advantageous to him, it would only be good for a sneak attack. 2 fire arrows upgraded to ultimate spells, along with the damage from a prepared flame barrier, might be all he could cast before being noticed. Afterwards, he would have to suffer from the bombardment of several dozens of dark fire bullets. Chanting spells at that point might be complicated, and he might really have to remain in the bone plane for all eternity. It would have been great if the Gaugas battlemage next to him was still alive. With his tyrannical physical strength, stalling the bone devil might not be an issue. And maybe with the power of the 2 of them together, they might have had the strength to get rid of the bone devil. With his attention drawn back to the battlemage, Lin Yun was suddenly startled, shock plastered all over his face. Strange, this Gaugas battlemage's body doesn't have the slightest scent of rot. Could it be that the bodies of the favorites of the wilderness don't even rot after years? That can't be. This is the bone plane filled with death energy. Anything would corrode 10 times faster here, let alone the Gaugas battlemage. Even the corpse of a dragon would turn into another bone dragon after 300 years. Lin Yun's eyes suddenly shone. He finally understood why this spiritual magic staff would have such a powerful mana-strengthening effect, why his path looked man-made, and why that Gaugas battlemage body hadn't become rotten after so many years. His doubts were suddenly cleared up. This was all because the Gaugas battlemage next to him wasn't a living person. When Lin Yun's thoughts reached this point, he rushed to lift the plate armor of the Gaugas battlemage. Sure enough, Lin Yun nearly took a step back subconsciously. What appeared before him was an astonishing skeleton built out of gold essence. Numerous alchemy arrays were carved onto the skeleton, each of them being at least master alchemist level. If such a gold essence construct appeared in the outside world, it would create a huge stir. This was enough to make all alchemists spend a crazy amount of money. But Lin Yun didn't have time to care about that at the moment. His eyes only swept through the arrays, and he quickly found the location of that alchemy puppet's mana source. Just as Lin Yun expected, the mana source was completely empty. Now, he only needed one more thing. Every alchemy puppet had unique control runes. Different types of alchemy puppets had a different number of control runes. For example, the mining alchemy puppets produced by the Gilded Rose only had 3 or 5 control runes and could only carry out a few types of instructions like extracting or in transportation. But the control runes of some battle puppets would be a lot more complicated, and the number could reach several dozens or more. Since battle puppets couldn't think by themselves, only by having enough control runes would they be able to adapt and react to any situations. What Lin Yun lacked now were the control runes. Looks like an unsolvable problem. Wanted to find the control runes of an alchemy puppet that had been shut down for over 300 years was an impossible task. But Lin Yun actually smiled. While smiling, he took out the inheritance ring. Too obvious in all of no scent. Only the Black Tower was capable of crafting a Gaugas battlemage puppet model. Adet novel Benedat. In other words, the remains he found earlier most likely belonged to this alchemy puppet's master. That master had left 2 items behind. A spiritual level magic staff, which was the mana source of that alchemy puppet, and an inheritance level ring, which Lin Yun hadn't had time to study yet. But if it didn't contain the control runes of the alchemy puppet, what else could it be? Lin Yun didn't spend too much time thinking farther and took out the inheritance ring. Under the rotation of the magic array, mana poured into the ring, and with a click, a deep Nesser sound echoed in Lin Yun's ears. 1, 2, 3, 4. Lin Yun hadn't expected that the alchemy puppet would have a total of 130 control runes. Moreover, those 130 control runes were divided into a few layers, each layer more precise than the one before. Most of the lowest control runes could even be modified to add casting skills to the alchemy puppet. This was quite overpowering, tantamount to having the usual benefits of an alchemy puppet along with the casting skills of a mage. Naturally, the prerequisite was that the master of the alchemy puppet had to have already mastered that skill. This wasn't a problem for Lin Yun. After remembering all the control runes, Lin Yun put the ring back in his pocket. It was the first time he had felt truly relaxed ever since the Bone Devil had awakened, because he knew that he now had the power to fight against it. If everything went smoothly, he might be able to get hold of the nether iron vein in advance. He inserted the magic staff into the alchemy puppet's body, the huge elemental amber filling the empty spot for the mana source. A large amount of mana poured in like a waterfall, and 3 seconds later, the alchemy puppet's finger moved. 10 seconds later, the gold essence frame's arrays began radiating with light. After 30 seconds, the alchemy puppet's body shook fiercely under the radiance emitted by the elemental amber. Recharged. Attack. Lin Yin pulled out the spiritual magic staff and simultaneously ordered through the control runes in Nesser language. The originally stiff body immediately straightened and grabbed the gold essence lance next to its body before rushing to the pathway at an astonishing speed. Lin Yin finally understood how the pathway had been carved, and in fact, it couldn't really be described as being carved. The alchemy puppet with its heavy plate armor was like an armored bulldozer. A sweep from the 3-meter lance in its hand was enough to easily plow through the earth. In just a moment, it soared through the 100 meters or so of the narrow passage. Just as the alchemy puppet rushed in, the bone devil entered from the other side. The sinister roar filled that narrow space. The 2 phosphorus lights within the empty sockets pulsated as several dozens of dark fire bullets were rotating around it, just like sinister will-o-wisps. The bone devil was clearly distracted when the alchemy puppet appeared. Despite the bone devil's strength being similar to that of a high mage, it wasn't nearly as intelligent. With its pitiful mind, it was really difficult to understand a strange existence like this alchemy puppet. It wasn't an undead being, but neither was it a living life form, yet it was letting out astonishing mana fluctuations. What kind of creature was that? The alchemy puppet wouldn't clear up the bone devil's question, though. The gold essence lance swept over, sending the bone devil's huge body flying. A deep sound echoed out as it struck the wall. But the bone devil was worthy of being a powerful undead life form with the strength of a high mage. After being struck with such a heavy blow, it only roared in indignation before staggering back up. The alchemy puppet's blow had clearly infuriated this hegemon of the Black Wasteland. The 2 lights were burning as it rushed towards the alchemy puppet with an angry roar. Another deep clash echoed as the 2 non-human creatures knocked into each other. A hegemon of the Black Wasteland controlling dark fire bullets, and an alchemy puppet wielding a gold essence lance. This fight had just started, yet it already looked like a desperate brawl. Each time the 2 combatants collided, loud sounds that would make one feel numb would thunder out. Defense had no part in that fight, and they only went all out with their attacks. This fight was fierce enough that even a great swordsman would turn pale upon watching. The bone devil would endure the gold essence lance passing through its body in order to ensure that its own dark fire bullets would land, and the alchemy puppet would let the dark fire bullets hit its body in order to land a blow on the bone devil. Among the dust, a sinister hole could be seen on the bone devil's chest, as 3 of its ribs had already broken. Naturally, the alchemy puppet was hardly better off. The thick gold essence plate armor had already been heavily dented in several locations, and there was even a sharp bone piercing through its stomach. Lin Yun left down the long passage while continuously chanting the control runes, tightly holding the spiritual magic staff and the sage chapter in his hands. His palms were soaked in sweat, because he knew that he only had one chance. If he missed that opportunity, no matter how fierce the alchemy puppet was, he would have no choice but to remain in the bone plane. After all, this alchemy puppet was merely at the 1st rank Great Mage and 5th rank Great Swordsman level. Compared to a bone devil that could contend with a high mage, it was still quite far off. It looked like the alchemy puppet was a match for the bone devil at the moment, but Lin Yin knew that it wasn't because of the alchemy puppet's inherent strength, but rather because he was manipulating 3 control runes each second. In other words, Lin Yun's control was raised to its limit, forcibly improving the alchemy puppet's fighting strength. But that kind of increase couldn't possibly last long. After all, there were 130 control runes, and in a fight where nothing was set in stone, every control rune had to be used perfectly with no room for mistakes. Even if it was Lin Yun, keeping up with such a high-intensity battle without making any mistakes couldn't go on indefinitely. That battle did appear fierce, but the one who was enduring the most pressure was still the one controlling the alchemy puppet, Lin Yun. Fortunately, he didn't have to wait too long for that opportunity. After another bitter clash, the two were once again entangled. The dazzling gold essence lance held a dazzling flame as it pierced through the Bone Devil's chest. The fierce fire elements burst out and caused the Bone Devil to let out a mournful yell. Filled with rage, the Bone Devil looked at the lance in its chest and pounced ferociously, making the alchemy puppet fall over. Clashing sounds echoed out one after the other. The sounds became fiercer as a thick, bony fist kept striking against the alchemy puppet's body. The thickest part of the gold essence armor had already sunk in, and the cave shook each time the thick fist landed. Under normal circumstances, Lin Yun would definitely order the alchemy puppet to break away from the Bone Devil, because if it kept going, the puppet wouldn't be able to recover from the damage. But this time, Lin Yun actually ordered the puppet to remain entangled with the Bone Devil. The alchemy puppet also attacked crazily, the gold essence lance piercing deeper into the Bone Devil centimeter by centimeter, continuously bursting with fire magic elements. It looked like fireworks were being set off within the Bone Devil's chest, each burst followed by a mournful yell. Now, the long-awaited opportunity had finally appeared. Lin Yun tightly gripped the spiritual magic staff in his hands, and a large amount of mana poured into his body from the burning spirit wood. Lin Yun then activated the Sage Chapter in his other hand, the magic symbol of the fire arrow flickering on the stone tablet. A whoosh could be heard, but was barely noticeable because of the Bone Devil's loud shouts. But this fire arrow carried a long trail of flames as it tore through the air and exploded against the Bone Devil skull. At it Novel Benedat, in front of a great mage, a Bone Devil's body was almost unbreakable, as it was shockingly hard and had frightening resistances. Even if a flame burst exploded on the Bone Devil's body, it would only leave a burn mark behind. But this was a fire arrow that had become an ultimate spell thanks to the Sage Chapter, and it was now bursting with the might of a high mage spell. Only a bang was heard as the first fire arrow exploded upon striking the Bone Devil's skull, and flames spread out along with fragments of bone. A hole had been drilled by the fire arrow in the skull that could make a great mage despair. The Bone Devil let out a painful cry due to its sudden injury and momentarily couldn't pay attention to the alchemy puppet under it, which sent it flying over to the nearby stone wall. At that moment, the Bone Devil had already turned its body, its phosphorus lights burning crazily as they stared firmly at Lin Yun. It sped up as it dashed furiously at Lin Yun. The cave shook underneath its feet. The part of the path that Lin Yun had taken cover in was only a bit over a meter tall, while the Bone Devil's body reached several meters. So normally, it wouldn't be able to rush in. But the Bone Devil was too powerful. It wasn't completely stopped as it rushed in, and half of its body still managed to squeeze in. But the most frightening thing was that bone blades on both arms had already appeared. As the two arms swayed back and forth, cracking sounds could be heard from the stone walls as chunks kept falling down, and in a short time, the roughly 1 meter tall path had expanded to a height of over 2 meters. At that time, the distance between Lin Yun and the Bone Devil was less than 5 meters. If it kept swinging its two bone blades a few more times, Lin Yun would soon be at the mercy of the Bone Devil. But Lin Yun was remaining motionless, as if he hadn't seen the crazy Bone Devil. The spiritual magic staff in his hand was radiating with light as a huge amount of mana continued pouring into his body. The second magic symbol on the Sage Chapter started shining. Afterwards, another whoosh could be heard. A fire arrow flew at the Bone Devil's skull once more, but this time there was no bone to block its path, and the soul fire, the source of undead life forms, was completely naked, exposed in front of Lin Yun. The might of the ultimate spell was displayed the moment the fire arrow and the soul fire collided. An extremely loud sound echoed as Lin Yun felt a heat wave rushing over. Soaring flames filled Lin Yun's field of view as the lively fire elements seemed to be singing at this moment. The furiously roaring bone devil fell still as if someone had drained all its power. The bones fell down, and the soul fire stopped burning. The bone devil's life ended there. Finally over. At the same time that the bone devil collapsed, Lin Yun sat on the ground, greedily absorbing some of the remaining soul fire. After being used twice, the mana and the elemental amber decorating the spiritual magic staff had already been depleted. Yet Lin Yun couldn't worry about that. He could only sit on the ground while panting. Although he only used 2 spells in that fight, the pressure he endured was far greater than the use of 200 spells. The 2 ultimate spells were Lin Yun's last card. If he hadn't been able to destroy the Bone Devil's soul fire with them, he would have had no hope to make a comeback. The pressure from hovering between life and death, even Lin Yun, who had been through countless close calls at the end of the magic era, was something he was unable to endure. Now that this fight was over, Lin Yun felt like collapsing. Lin Yun rested for a full 10 minutes. After 10 minutes, Lin Yun had recovered from his state of weakness. At novel been at. After feeling better, the first thing he did wasn't to check the damage of the alchemy puppet, but rather to look at the corpse of the Bone Devil. To Lin Yun, the biggest reward of this trip was getting rid of the Bone Devil ahead of schedule. Now, not only could initiate the mining of the Dark Iron Vein a month in advance, but he could also push the plan to get the Book of Death ahead by a month. Although the soul fire had already been destroyed, as Lin Yun crouched next to the Bone Devil's corpse, he could still feel the death energy leaking it. The amount of death energy that was still left after the destruction of the soul fire was extremely shocking. Lin Yun had already been mentally prepared regarding the power of the Bone Devil, so he hadn't placed his hopes on the undead predator ability. He wasn't Charles the Conqueror, who had exterminated all the undead of the undead plane. Lin Yun's undead predator ability would currently show some effects against low-level undead beings at most, wanting to intimidate an existence on par with a high mage like a Bone Devil. Maybe after he conquered the Bone Plane, Lin Yun had more trust in the mana he controlled than in an ability that he had yet to master. Sure enough, after crouching by the Bone Devil, Lin Yun quickly found the things he wanted. Lin Yun found the dark fire bullets that never left the body of the Bone Devil. Those dark fire bullets shouldn't be underestimated, as the existence of the bullets was the main reason that a Bone Devil could contend with a high mage. They were condensed from death energy and had surrounded the Bone Devil for who knows how many years. They were already infected with the characteristic corpse poison of undead life forms. In Lin Yun's eyes, each of these dark fire bullets was comparable to a splendid magic tool. They were single-use items with power that wasn't inferior to that of a spiritual magic tool by much. Only something like that monstrous alchemy puppet built from gold essence could handle a few dark fire bullets without collapsing. If Lin Yun tried to take the hits, let alone a few, he wouldn't even be able to endure one. Lin Yun found 23 dark fire bullets next to the Bone Devil. After the death of the Bone Devil, these dark fire bullets lost the source of their death energy and turned jet black. They were cold and rough, hardly eye-catching, but Lin Yun knew that these unremarkable bullets could still burst with shocking firepower as long as they were supplied with a bit of mana. Feeling very satisfied with the acquisition, Lin Yun put the bullets into his pocket. He also did not forget to tear off the 2 bone blades and set them up on the alchemy puppet's arms. That alchemy puppet modeled after the Gaugas battle mages no longer looked as mighty as when Lin Yun first saw it. Its gold essence plate armor had been deformed from the Bone Devil's blows to the point that it looked rather funny now. The scariest part was the gold essence frame, which was a bit twisted. It could no longer move as nimbly as before. Lin Yun couldn't find a good way to deal with the damage. This was the Bone Plane, after all. If someone happened to be looking for an undead life form, they would easily find it here, but there were no easily usable repair materials here. For lack of a better solution, Lin Yun could only set the alchemy puppet aside and think of a way to repair it after going back to no scent. Once done, Lin Yun did a last check to make sure there was nothing else worth collecting from the Bone Devil's corpse, and then picked up the Sage Chapter and the spiritual magic staff from the ground. What? But Lin Yun felt something wrong when he picked up the Sage Chapter. He noticed that a third ultimate spell slot had appeared on the Sage chapter. When Lin Yun first got hold of the Sage chapter, there was only one ultimate spell slot. After harvesting over 1,000 skeleton warriors' soul fires, a second slot had appeared. Lin Yun had speculated that it would take a long time before the third ultimate spell slot appeared. But he hadn't expected to confront and defeat the Bone Devil here. And after destroying its soul fire, the incomplete soul fire made the third slot appear ahead of time. This was even more important than 23 dark fire bullets to Lin Yun. Although the dark fire bullets were comparable to a spiritual magic tool's attack, the Sage chapter was an extraordinary component. The appearance of a third ultimate spell slot raised Lin Yun's power even farther. Just based on the previous fight, if Lin Yun had been able to use an extra ultimate spell, the battle would have been a few times easier. He might not necessarily have needed the alchemy puppet. With 3 ultimate spells cast in a row, Lin Yun would have had at least a 50% chance of destroying the Bone Devil's soul fire on his own. After dealing with all this, Lin Yun quickly gave up on the Bone Devil's body and just carried the alchemy puppet out of the cave. He knew that the biggest reward from this trip didn't come from the High Mage's remains, and it also wasn't the alchemy puppet. And it was neither the dark fire bullets left behind by the Bone Devil nor the 2 extra ultimate spell slots on the Sage chapter. The true harvest was the place where the Bone Devil had originally been slumbering. Lin Yun quickly went around the nether iron vein and reached the Bone Devil's lair. The Bone Devil's lair had been a forbidden death zone to Lin Yun. He wouldn't have been to keep his life if he had entered. But the situation had changed, and that place was now a treasure grove. Who didn't know that Bone Devils only slept in places with the richest death energy? And places with rich death energy usually produced magic materials. Moreover, with the passage of time, the Bone Devil's own death energy would permeate the area. Even Lin Yun didn't dare imagine to what extent those magic materials would mature. When the Bone Devil burst out of its lair, it left a huge hole in the black wasteland. The soil and its surroundings had already become soft and unsuitable for walking. But Lin Yun didn't care about that. He drew close and impatiently leaned to look down. There, Lin Yun saw a blossoming black flower.